Chapter 3744. Using the power of the heavenly way to defeat a strong enemy was the Heaven City Lord's method. This was indeed an extreme method. Ordinary heavenly venerables could also draw upon or even change the power of the nomological laws for their own use. However, they could only use a portion of the nomological laws. No one could use all the nomological laws. Only the heavenly way could do so. This was because the heavenly way was a collection of everything. It was a combination of all rules and nomological laws. Therefore, the will of the heavenly way was also terrifying. It could directly descend with its will and kill all strong enemies. The Heaven City Lord's lips curled into a smile as he said, "You were wrong to ask me to do my best. I once used this move to kill a peak heavenly venerate." This was his method. He had absolute confidence that he was the only one in the world. No one could go against the heavens and earth. When he moved, he would feel as if the heavens and earth were going against him. Even a heavenly venerate couldn't withstand this terrifying pressure. This will couldn't be seen, but everyone could feel it. They could feel how terrifying the descending will was from the heavenly venerate main hall. Bang! The golden radiance emitted from Yi Shiwen's body suddenly shattered. There was no reason for it to shatter like this. No attack could be seen. Even if the heavens wanted to kill you, you would always reveal all sorts of flaws. These flaws were enough to kill you. Boom! A terrifying power surged from Yi Shiwen's body. All sorts of divine marks and nomological laws danced around. These were the martial arts nomological laws that Yi Shiwen cultivated. However, everyone was shocked to find that the divine marks, nomological laws, and nomological laws had all turned into chains that locked Yi Shiwen up. They simply wouldn't listen to his commands. All your comprehension comes from the heavenly way. You think that you control everything, but in fact, the heavenly way is the true ruler. It's fine if you don't use your Tao, but once you use it, it will be stripped away by the heavenly way. Geniuses are the most formidable and respectable rulers. You people keep saying that you're going against the heavens, but in fact, you are all walking the wrong path. The Heaven City Lord said. The heavenly venerates had a pensive look on their faces. The Heaven City Lord's words had even shaken their Tao hearts. Indeed, whether it was the nomological laws they comprehended or the power they absorbed from the world, they all originated from the heavenly way. They claimed to be going against the heavens, but were they really going against the heavens? Wasn't everything still in the hands of the heavenly Tao? Many people suddenly felt a great terror because they felt as if a huge cage had appeared in front of them. This cage was so terrifying that they felt that it was impossible to break out. In the end, everything was still in the hands of the heavenly Tao. Without the heavenly Tao, they were nothing. Even though Empyreans like them were known to surpass the rules and could directly modify the rules, they were ultimately still beneath the heavenly Tao. To them, this was a kind of confinement, a restraint on their souls. If one were to say that they didn't pay much attention to it initially, then the words of the Heaven City Lord were like a wake-up call to them. Is there really no way to break through the shackles of the heavenly Tao? We've been defying the heavens for our entire lives. What joke! The heavenly Tao is the foundation of everything. We are also born under the heavenly Tao. Now, you actually say that you want to go against the heavens. Don't you think it's ridiculous? Many people's Tao hearts were actually shaken. This was the most terrifying thing. For an Empyrean, having their Tao heart shaken was even more terrifying than being heavily injured 8 or 10 times. Once their Tao hearts were shaken and they couldn't progress any further, it would be a small matter. The most terrifying thing was that their cultivation might rapidly regress overnight. This was originally impossible for Empyreans like them. Their mental cultivation had long reached the point where they could never retreat. They had never doubted the heavenly Tao that they had adhered to. In other words, these people were a group of paranoid maniacs. Now, the words of the Heaven City Lord had shaken these people. Yi Shiwen was facing the crushing pressure of the heavenly law at this time. All kinds of dreadful attacks emerged on the surface of his body. Fire, water, lightning, all kinds of imaginable and unimaginable attacks emerged on his body. Any Empyrean who could cultivate one of these attacks to the extreme would be regarded as an expert of a generation. Moreover, so many attacks appeared at the same time. How terrifying was this attack? This was the terrifying thing about the Heaven City's City Lord. Then, everyone saw the light of the magical law flying out from Yishuan's body. This was the magical law being stripped out of his body by the heavenly Tao. All of this originated from the heavenly Tao. Now, the heavenly Tao was going to strip everything out. This was something that no Empyrean could resist. The Heaven City's City Lord had relied on this move to kill a peak Empyrean expert. Yishuan looked at the Heaven City's City Lord. There was no expression on his face. He was just a little surprised. The Heaven City's City Lord had relied on this move to be on par with middle heavenly venerables in terms of power. It was indeed very impressive. The nomological laws and heavenly Tao in his body were being stripped away, but he wasn't anxious. Instead, he said, "Heaven City's City Lord, I remember that when you fought with middle heavenly venerables, you didn't have this kind of strength. Did you break through again during this time?" "That's right. After countless years, I have finally reached this step. I am only one step away from becoming a half-step ruler." The Heaven City's City Lord didn't deny it. He said, "As you said, since I have the ability, I should not pass on this responsibility. Since middle heavenly venerables no longer have the ability to lead the Fortune God dynasty to defeat the foreign enemies, then I should let someone with the ability take over. I think I am qualified to do so." The Heaven City's City Lord also did not pass on this responsibility. He was very confident. "You shouldn't have let me use it. Of course, you didn't let me use it. In fact, you can't stop it. If you admit defeat now, I will let you go. You're also very strong. When we fight against the ancient era, you should play an important role." The Heaven City's City Lord looked at Yi Shiwen and said seriously, "Heaven City's City Lord, I think you are a little too confident." Yi Shiwen said, "You want to make arrangements now?" As he said this, everyone was shocked to find that Yi Shiwen, who was gradually being stripped of his heavenly Tao, suddenly stopped. In his body, the heavenly Tao that was being stripped away bit by bit was flowing back. Although the source of all this is the heavenly Tao, since it has become mine, it is mine. No one can take it away. Yi Shiwen said, "City Lord of Heaven's City, I am different from you. Everything I have cultivated bit by bit, comprehended bit by bit, without the slightest bit of trickery. It is impossible for anyone to deprive me of my Tao." Yi Shiwen's expression didn't show the slightest bit of frustration. Instead, he seemed to have gained a lot. Just now, when the Great Way left his body, he seemed to have entered a whole new realm. He finally understood why he couldn't break through to the half-step sovereign realm no matter how hard he tried. He could only faintly touch this realm. Although half-step sovereign realm experts weren't in the sovereign realm, they were at least half a step into that realm. However, in order to truly enter the realm of a half-step ruler, he had to break away from the current system. Whether it was his strength or his comprehension, they all came from the heavenly Tao. Therefore, he was trapped in the cage of the heavenly Tao. Ordinary people naturally couldn't feel it. It was still too far away for them. However, Yi Shiwen was a top-notch expert, and he had already touched that layer of ceiling. Only great destruction can lead to great establishment. Only by breaking away from the restraints of the martial epoch's heavenly Tao could he break through to the legendary half-step sovereign realm. Of course, half-step sovereigns didn't completely break away from the heavenly Tao. Therefore, they would die with the epoch. The epoch made them strong, but at the same time, it also restricted them. Those half-step sovereigns who gradually aged could only wait for death, because they couldn't break away from the restraints of the heavenly Tao. This was an extremely terrifying situation. The reason why they wanted to destroy the martial epoch was to obtain a powerful force from the martial epoch that could help them break away from the heavenly Tao. The ancient epoch's heavenly Tao might not seem like much, and it could even continuously give birth to new life forms and experts. However, only when one reached that stage would one understand that the entire ancient epoch's heavenly Tao contained a kind of death chi. It was invisible and untouchable. The power of death pulled them towards death. This power of death grew stronger and stronger, to the point that even half-step sovereigns couldn't resist it. At that time, half-step sovereigns would fall. The power of death existed invisibly, and there was nothing they could do to resist it. It was like how ordinary living beings, after vindicating their Tao and becoming gods, would understand the true meaning of death. Only then would they be able to escape death and live as long as heaven and earth. It was the same for these half-step sovereigns. To resist this power of death, unless they could break through to the sovereign realm, it was only a matter of time before they died. Only great destruction could lead to great establishment. Only now did Yi Shiwen understand this principle. In other words, he finally found the path to becoming a half-step sovereign. Although it sounded simple, in reality, it trapped most peak heavenly venerates. Even if they understood what to do, only a few could do it, as it was too difficult. In an epoch, many peak heavenly venerates were born, and many people touched that realm. However, the number of people who truly became half-step sovereigns could be counted on one hand. The difficulty was easy to imagine. You've made me understand many things. This battle should end here. Chapter 37:45. You've made me understand a lot of things. This battle should end here. Yi Shiwen finally moved. He was no longer just passively accepting things like before. The martial venerate seal appeared above his head and rotated, suppressing the chaos in all directions. Boom! Yi Shiwen's body erupted with endless magical power from the void. The golden magical power was boiling and spreading out like a vast ocean. 6 paths of reincarnation fist. Yi Shiwen's fist blasted upwards and directly blasted into the powerful heavenly will. Although ordinary people couldn't see or touch it, this wasn't the case for a heavenly venerate, especially since he already had the possibility of being killed after manifesting. Yi Shiwen had already killed countless incarnations of the heavenly will during his previous tribulation transcendence. Yi Shiwen naturally wouldn't have been able to contend against the entire heavenly will. However, a mere wisp of it was nothing. Rumble! Everyone could see the entire chaos shaking. The manifested heavenly will had actually been blasted into nothingness by Yi Shiwen's fist. This fist was really too terrifying. The fist energy caused the sky and earth to crack and the chaos to sink into this fist. This was Yi Shiwen's true eruption. Many heavenly venerates couldn't help but change their expressions when they saw this scene. This terrifying power was much more terrifying than the heavenly will summoned by the Sky City Lord. This is his true strength. The southern heavenly venerate, the northern heavenly venerate, and the others were also shocked. After Yi Shiwen displayed his true strength, they realized that their previous estimation of him had been fundamentally wrong. Among these people, the person whose mood had changed the most was none other than the current Moon City Lord, Space-Time Heavenly Venerate. Although he had been defeated by Yi Shiwen in the previous battle and failed to obtain the Eastern Heavenly Venerate position, he had still been considered to be on the same level, so he had been honorably defeated. However, only a short period of time had passed. After becoming the Moon City Lord, he had relied on the huge destiny of the Fortune Divine Dynasty to advance to the 9th level of Heavenly Venerate. Although he was still far from being a peak Heavenly Venerate, this kind of progress was already very shocking. At this rate, it would only be a matter of time before he entered the ranks of peak Heavenly Venerables. However, when he saw Yi Shiwen again, not only had Yi Shiwen's combat power reached the peak Celestial Master Realm that he yearned for, but he had even surpassed it. Yi Shiwen's starting point was almost the same. In fact, Yi Shiwen's starting point was even lower than his. However, Yi Shiwen was now ahead of him. Perhaps some people were born different. On the other side, the Heaven City Lord was shocked to see that Yi Shiwen was able to resist his own heaven's will and even kill it. However, his expression didn't change at all. He had been domineering his entire life and had never been afraid of anyone. Even among the 10 great divine cities castellans, he was one of the most respected ones. Heaven's will is like a blade. He roared. His palm grabbed out from the void, and a long saber appeared. It was incomparably sharp. He had actually condensed his heaven's will into a long saber. It was extremely terrifying. He slashed out with this saber. In terms of saber cultivation, he wasn't inferior to demon venerable Luo Ho. It was extremely terrifying. He had been domineering his entire life. Although Yi Shiwen had displayed terrifying combat power, he didn't back down at all. The long saber in his hand burst out with billions of immortal lights, directly destroying a large area of chaos. In an instant, it had already slashed towards Yi Shiwen. Refining heaven's will into a saber? That's an interesting method. As soon as Yi Shiwen's voice fell, the saber fell completely. It crossed more than half of the chaos and landed on his body. Clang! There was a huge roar. The martial venerable seal above Yi Shiwen's head flew out and emitted countless rays of nomological laws. They interweaved into a large net and blocked the saber. At this time, Yi Shiwen directly attacked. At this time, there was no longer anything to hide. He attacked with a peerless fist technique. He didn't use any weapons. In fact, he himself was a peerless weapon. Whoosh! Yi Shiwen took a step and arrived in front of the Heaven City Lord. This was an ability that he hadn't displayed in front of everyone yet. It was his extraordinary speed. Many people didn't expect him to be this fast. Even the Heaven City Lord didn't expect this. Even the Heaven City Lord didn't expect this amazing speed. It even made him think of Middle Heavenly Venerables. He regarded Middle Heavenly Venerables as his greatest opponent. Naturally, he had some understanding of Middle Heavenly Venerables techniques. There was nothing special about Middle Heavenly Venerables techniques. They just relied on their own powerful physique cultivation and their amazing speed to form a set of attack methods that were difficult to match in the world. Now, Yi Shiwen had rushed in front of him in an instant. There was no other method. He just blasted out a simple punch and directly destroyed the entire desolate, chaotic border, turning this place into a true danger zone. The Heaven City Lord didn't even have time to retract his heaven's will saber. He was almost defenseless when Yi Shiwen rushed in front of him. Bang! An incomparably loud roar was accompanied by a huge collision. Billions of immortal lights and auspicious colors collided together, illuminating the entire chaos. Thump, thump, thump. This blow instantly determined the outcome of the battle. The Heaven City Lord retreated again and again. He was at a disadvantage in this exchange with Yi Shiwen. His entire arm was trembling. Yi Shiwen's punch was much more terrifying than he had imagined. This kind of attack was too similar to Middle Heavenly Venerables. Similarly, unparalleled speed coupled with a tyrannical body made him invincible. However, Yi Shiwen was clearly more dangerous than Middle Heavenly Venerables. This was because these weren't his trump cards, nor were they the entirety of his attack. Again, Yi Shiwen blasted out another punch. The fist energy traversed more than half of the chaos. The Heaven City Lord had just stabilized from the previous attack. Before he could completely stabilize himself, he was forced to take on Yi Shiwen's punch again. Puffed. This time, the Heaven City Lord was in an even more sorry state than before. Blood splattered from his chest. This was the result of Yi Shiwen's punch. He staggered and slid across the chaotic universe for tens of millions of miles before coming to a stop. He had suffered a heavy blow. All his internal organs were about to explode. Blood was dripping everywhere, but it hadn't seeped through the surface of his body. However, blood still flowed from the corners of his mouth and continuously dripped into the chaos. All of his defenses were completely defenseless in front of Yi Shiwen's fist. The difference was just too great. All the Heavenly Venerables were also waiting for the outcome of this battle. They didn't even dare to blink. This was because they knew very well that the outcome of this battle would likely determine who the true master of the Fortune God dynasty would be for a period of time. Eastern Heavenly Venerate Yi Shiwen, or the Heaven City Lord. This was a confrontation between these two giants. However, it was clear that the two of them didn't erupt into a fierce battle, as everyone had imagined. The intensity of the battle was indeed high enough. Any blow from either side could seriously injure or even kill an ordinary Heavenly Venerate. This showed that both sides had combat strength that far exceeded that of an ordinary heavenly venerate. However, the two sides weren't evenly matched. The Heaven City Lord was already showing signs of defeat at the start of the battle. Yishuin didn't hold back. Instead, he rushed forward again. His fists swept out like two golden dragons and directly struck the Heaven City Lord. In an instant, the Heaven City Lord vomited blood as he was sent flying by Yishuin. The injuries on his body were even more severe than before. "Admit defeat," Yishuin said faintly. "You won't be a match for me. Continuing to fight like this won't do you any good." The Heaven City Lord steadied himself and looked at Yishuin. There was a flash of indignation in his eyes. He could also see that if this continued, he would only be easily defeated by Yishuin. In terms of conventional strength, Yishuin was much stronger than him. Even if he didn't admit this, there was no way he could deny it. He didn't know how Yishuin was so strong, but he didn't have much time left. The Heaven City Lord wasn't willing to lose just like this. He had planned for so long and endured for so long before he finally had this opportunity. He was going to fight one last time. As he thought of this, he couldn't help but roar. Suddenly, countless heavenly will appeared and instantly entered his body. In an instant, the entire primal chaos was ignited. However, it wasn't flames that ignited everything. Instead, it was a terrifying, forbidden technique that was formed from the power of the heavens and earth. Blood dripped from the Heaven City Lord's body. The blood dyed the primal chaos golden and then began to burn. Then, the flame spread out too quickly. There was no time or opportunity for anyone to dodge. In an instant, Yishuin was drowned. There was no way for him to dodge. The Heaven City Lord's body exploded and then reassembled. In the process of this explosion and reassembly, he was severely injured and his vitality was damaged. He stared in Yishuin's direction. This was his final attack. The forbidden technique could ignite everything. With the power of heavenly will, it was enough to defeat and even kill any strong enemy. However, to his disappointment, after the chaotic tide ignited by the forbidden technique dissipated, Yishuin's figure stood still in the universe. It seemed that the forbidden technique hadn't been able to hurt Yishuin at all. The light of Yishuin's chi of virtue was so dazzling that people couldn't open their eyes. With the protection of the chi of virtue, this kind of attack couldn't hurt Yishuin at all. Seeing this, the fire of ambition in the eyes of the Sky City Lord dissipated. "I admit defeat." After a sigh, the Heaven City Lord's figure disappeared into the primal chaos. Chapter 3746. All the celestial masters were silent. This result was within their expectations. Many celestial masters already had an answer when Yishuin defeated the three-peak celestial masters. However, he was able to defeat the Heaven City Lord with such a fast speed and overwhelming advantage. This was the fundamental reason why they couldn't accept it for a while. It was simply too terrifying. Yishuin stepped out of the chaos and returned to the main hall. He sat on the throne, looked at everyone, and said, "I think everyone should be satisfied now. Is there anyone else who wants to give me some pointers?" Yishuin glanced at everyone, and everyone suddenly became speechless. Yishuin indeed had the strength to suppress all outstanding heroes. If they jumped out at this time, then it wouldn't just be opposing Yishuin, but provoking him instead. At this time, they finally understood why the Middle Holy Master chose Yishuin as his supporter. It was not because he was stupid, nor was it because Yishuin was his confidant. It was because Yishuin really had such terrifying strength. Compared to the previous Middle Heavenly Master, Yishuin was probably stronger, not weaker. Although everyone had doubts in their hearts about how to end the battle between the two powerhouses, it was obvious from the situation that Yishuin had mentioned that it was not the time to talk about this problem. In that case, I will temporarily take over the power of the Fortune God Dynasty. In the future, if you have any problems, you can report to me. Yishuin said, "Don't ignore what I said before, because this time, if we fail, not only will we pay with our lives, the entire Fortune God dynasty and even the entire martial arts era will be buried with us. Everyone's expression became more dignified. After solving the problem of the leader, they thought further. Regardless of whether they were convinced by Yi Shiwen as the temporary leader, regardless of whether they had any grudges with Yi Shiwen, they were unanimous in facing the attack of the ancient era. Everyone, go back and get ready. Wait for my decree at any time. This battle may happen at any time. I don't know when it will happen. It may happen in the next moment, or it may happen countless years later. Yi Shiwen said, but I hope that everyone will be ready to go at that time. Yi Shiwen did not make any strategic arrangements because he knew that it was meaningless. In the end, they had to defeat the other side with absolute strength. In a war of this level, any kind of plan would not be very useful. If those ancient epics could not annihilate the martial epoch's heavenly Tao, no matter how powerful the half-step sovereign realm experts were, they would not be able to defeat the Fortune divine dynasty. On the other hand, if the Fortune God dynasty could not defeat the half-step sovereign experts, then it would be meaningless no matter how many ordinary ancient era experts they killed. Because the deciding factor was never the ordinary experts, but the true top experts. The results of the Heavenly Venerables assembly also spread throughout the Fortune God dynasty, along with the return of various Heavenly Venerables and Emperors. Of course, it was impossible for everyone in the Fortune God dynasty to know about it. At most, only a few Emperors, and Emperor Realm Masters knew about the ancient era's invasion and were preparing for the final battle. Even if the Heavenly Venerables and Emperors could escape, the results of the Heavenly Venerables Conference spread throughout the Fortune God dynasty. Of course, not everyone in the Fortune God dynasty knew about it. At most, only a few Emperors, and quasi-Emperor experts knew about the ancient era's invasion and were preparing for the final battle. Even if they had not experienced the War of the Era, it did not mean that they did not know how cruel it was. It was not a war of annihilation, nor was it a war of annihilation, but a war of annihilation. The Heavenly Venerables Conference this time had confirmed the person in charge of the Fortune God dynasty. It was obvious that this person was the Eastern Heavenly Venerables, Marshal Exalt Yi Shiwen. After the original Middle Heavenly Venerables suffered serious injuries, no one knew how long it would take for him to recover. Before that, the entire Fortune God dynasty was in Yi Shiwen's hands. After confirming his position, Yi Shiwen moved his office from the Eastern Heavenly Venerables residence to the Fortune God capital. The situation of the entire Fortune God dynasty was still very stable, just like when the Middle Heavenly Venerables were still around. At the same time, Yi Shiwen also began to make the final preparations for the upcoming decisive battle. In addition to handling various matters of the Fortune God dynasty, he also secretly dispatched many Heavenly Master experts to the chaos. It was for no other reason than to be able to grasp the movements of those ancient eras as soon as possible. This was to prevent them from being caught off guard. If those ancient epochs wanted to destroy the martial epoch, they would have to make a huge move. Just a few half-step sovereigns would not be enough to take down the entire martial epoch. Hence, it would be easy to find out what was going on. After dealing with the matters of the Eastern Territory, Western Territory, Central Territory, and even the entire Fortune God dynasty, Yi Shiwen finally had the time to look for the War of Venerables. He wanted to know what kind of trump cards the Fortune God dynasty had left behind to deal with those half-step sovereigns. The War of Venerables did not say much, but led Yi Shiwen to the deepest part of the Fortune God capital, in front of an incomparably huge treasure vault. This treasure vault's door towered into the clouds, actually tens of millions of zhang tall. After the War of Venerables formed a hand seal, the entire door slowly opened. In an instant, endless treasure light directly surged out, unexpectedly forming a wave. This is the largest treasure vault in the Fortune God dynasty. Only Middle Heavenly Venerables have the authority to enter. Even I cannot enter. However, you are temporarily acting as a Middle Heavenly Venerables, so you can enter. The War of Venerables glanced at Yi Shiwen and said, "In the deepest part of this treasure vault, there is a treasure robe called the Good Fortune Treasure Robe. This good fortune treasure robe was refined by the fortune heavenly monarch before he became a sovereign. After he achieved Tao, this good fortune treasure robe was sealed inside. The War Venerables said, "The attacks of half-step sovereigns are very terrifying. Only with the good fortune treasure robe can you contend against them." Previously, you also wore the energy treasure robe of the Eastern Heavenly Venerables. In fact, that energy treasure robe is actually a replica of the good fortune treasure robe. Yishuan nodded. Even without the War Venerables saying this, he knew how terrifying the attacks of half-step sovereigns were. After all, he had seen it with his own eyes. With his current strength, he could not withstand such an attack. It was not that his golden body of virtue was too weak, but because the attacks of half-step sovereigns were actually existences of another realm, completely above his existence. In addition to this good fortune treasure robe, there is also a sword called the Sword of Destiny. It is a Tao tool that the former Middle Heavenly Venerables carried with him. Later, it was also left here. Only by subduing the Sword of Destiny can you truly have the possibility of injuring or even killing those half-step sovereigns. The War Venerables said. Yishuan nodded. So this was the trump card of the Fortune God dynasty. With these two supreme Tao tools, one for attack and one for defense, they indeed had the possibility of contending against half-step sovereigns. However, although these two Tao tools are powerful, they still have a flaw. Unless you have also stepped into the half-step sovereign's realm, you will consume a lot of energy. Within a certain range, you can obtain the blessing of the Fortune God capital and continuously replenish your energy. However, once the distance is too far, you won't be able to replenish your energy. Therefore, although these two Tao tools are powerful, they can only be used as a defensive power for so many years. The War Venerables continued to explain. After listening to the War Venerables' explanation, all of Yishuan's doubts were cleared. No wonder the Middle Heavenly Venerables were not anxious at all, even though they knew that the Chaos Overlord might come out. With such a trump card, the Middle Heavenly Venerables could indeed ignore the Chaos Overlord. Although the Chaos Overlord might put the Fortune God dynasty in a difficult situation, that was all. They could not advance any further. All these years, our Fortune Divine dynasty has always had a trump card to contend against half-step sovereigns. However, this time situation is different. Several half-step sovereigns have come personally. Originally, it wasn't a big deal. Under normal circumstances, if an ancient era's half-step sovereign dares to enter our martial epoch, they will be suppressed by the martial epoch's heavenly Tao. At that time, not only can we defeat them one by one, we can even kill them all. The Zhanzun glared and said fiercely. He wished he could kill those half-step sovereigns with his own hands. Unfortunately, he knew that his cultivation was too low. He was no match for them. He could only pin his hopes on Yishuan. But now, those half-step sovereigns are clearly planning to kill our martial epoch's heavenly Tao. Once they succeed, no one can stop them. Don't worry, this time I will stop them. Yishuan said. In this battle, there was no way out. He could only fight with his full strength. Even if it was not for others, he had to do it for his family, his friends and family. After speaking, Yishuan took a step forward and directly entered it. He was immediately submerged in the endless treasure light. Eastern Heavenly Venerables, I'm counting on you this time. The War Venerables said as they watched Yishuan disappear in the boundless treasure light. Yishuan directly entered the boundless treasure light and directly opened his heavenly eye. He finally saw the situation in the entire treasury. He saw all kinds of super treasures that were rarely seen in the outside world floating in the air. Many of them had even formed their own intelligence and turned into extremely powerful treasure demons. Chapter 37:47. These powerful treasure demons, if placed in the outside world, could easily compete with an emperor, and some could even compete with a heavenly venerable. They were extremely terrifying and powerful. But this was not surprising, because many of these treasure demons' bodies were Tao tools, and many were even heavenly venerable Tao tools. These were the Tao tools of the masters who were killed by the Fortune God dynasty during its establishment, and some of them were even heavenly venerable Tao tools. This huge treasury itself was a blessed land of the heavens and earth. It gathered an endless amount of spirit chi. Under the nourishment of this spirit chi, these magic tools did not lose their luster after losing their masters. On the contrary, they evolved from weapon spirits to treasure demons. Although they were both artifacts, artifact spirits and treasure demons were different. Artifact spirits took the master's will as the first standard and were controlled by the master. However, treasure demons had already developed their own will and were not controlled by anyone. Powerful treasure demons were everywhere, and Yi Shiwen even saw a world. These treasure demons were like the almighties of the outside world, giving lectures and imparting powerful grandaos. Powerful countries and powerful sects were formed in these worlds. In fact, there was no difference from the outside world. This was a world of treasure demons. But as soon as Yi Shiwen's aura entered, it alarmed the treasure demons inside the treasure trove. Different from the low-level treasure demons, these treasure demons were almighties. They did not eat flesh and blood, but absorbed spiritual energy to cultivate the grand Taos. Within their bodies, there was a powerful great Tao left behind by their former masters. As long as they cultivated according to it, they could reach an extremely impressive realm. In addition, their bodies were also very powerful. This was the reason why they could stand shoulder to shoulder with imperial emperors and even heavenly venerables. The Fortune God dynasty's foundation is indeed deep and frightening. Although on the surface, it doesn't seem like the Fortune God dynasty has a lot of forces, but in fact, the strength hidden in the dark is terrifying. At a critical moment, these treasure demons can become the Fortune God dynasty's trump card. Once released, it's more than enough to destroy one of the foreign domains. Yi Shiwen naturally understood as he watched from the dark. He released his formidable coercion, and all the treasure demons along the way knelt down one after another. They didn't dare to contend against him. Whether it was an emperor or an heavenly venerable, there was no difference. Why haven't I seen this person before? The Middle Empyrean that came before didn't look like this. Why is there another one? Did something happen to the Fortune Divine Dynasty? Why are they changing so frequently recently? I don't know what's going on, but it looks like this person's aura is even more tyrannical than that Middle Heavenly Venerate from before. Although these treasure demons were confined to this world, it didn't mean that they didn't know anything. This was because they were treasure demons that were disguised by Tao artifacts, or even Empyrean Tao artifact spirits. Therefore, they also had the memories of previous artifact spirits and naturally understood what the Fortune Divine Dynasty was. It was an incomparably powerful giant, and the ones who ruled over it were the Supremes. The Middle Empyreans were their leaders. It could be said that even they were under the rule of a Middle Heavenly Venerate. Only a Middle Heavenly Venerate could enter this place, so they could only crawl down out of habit. Moreover, this person had an unimaginably terrifying power. It was as if they would die if they were just glanced at. It was too terrifying, and they didn't even dare to look up. Yi Shiwen's gaze swept across this world. He didn't pay attention to these ordinary treasure demons. Although these treasure demons represented Tao tools, and even heavenly master Tao tools, they didn't have any significance to him at the moment. Soon, many people discovered that this newly arrived Middle Heavenly Venerate seemed to be looking for something. This treasure house was filled with treasure energy. There were all kinds of barriers and arrays everywhere. Even if a Heavenly Venerate was here, it would be impossible to see everything clearly. Yi Shiwen's gaze swept over the kingdoms and sects of the treasure demons. They were exactly the same as the outside world, but each of them was different. This had a lot to do with the great Tao left behind by their previous masters. Looking at the kingdoms and sects of these treasure demons was a bit of an eye-opener for Yi Shiwen. Everyone who was able to reach the extreme Tao realm, even if it was an Emperor realm expert, had their own uniqueness. With Yi Shiwen's current cultivation, he naturally understood wherever he saw. He suddenly felt that it was quite beneficial to his great Tao. However, his main goal was not these treasure demons, but the good fortune treasure robe and the sword of fate. He didn't think that it was difficult to find them. These two, according to the quality, were completely superior to other Tao artifacts. It shouldn't be difficult to distinguish them. As long as he could find them, the rest would be simple. Yi Shiwen's gaze swept across the entire treasure house, and he could see through the secrets behind the layers of barriers and arrays. Soon, Yi Shiwen found one of them. It was an evolved sword principle world. This sword principle world was almost like an evolved real world. In this sword world, living beings were born. These living beings were born with sword energy. They were born to be sword masters, and even powerful ones could be comparable to emperors. However, they were only comparable to emperors. There was no way they could be compared to emperors. This was because they were all living beings born from this world of the way of the sword. Their great Tao laws were not complete, so it could be said that they had cultivated to their current level through unorthodox means. And no matter how powerful they seemed, they still had fatal flaws in the end. After a certain period of time, they would naturally die of old age. They couldn't be like emperors who could live as long as the world. However, every time a living being evolved that was comparable to an imperial lord, it was equivalent to evolving a brand new path of the sword Tao. For the entire sword world, it was equivalent to adding another great Tao. If it continued to evolve like this, it might evolve into a complete world in the future. This method could be said to be in defiance of the natural order. Just like the replacement of an era, every time an era was destroyed, the laws of the entire world would be more perfected. Although the heavenly law that appeared next time would not be the same, it would obviously be more perfected. However, compared to the replacement of an era, the replacement process of this sword principle world was much faster. However, this could also be regarded as a righteous great Tao. Yi Shiwen looked at it for a while, and then directly entered this world. When Yi Shiwen entered this world, it immediately caused a commotion. This world seemed to be in front of him, but in fact, its real location was in layers of space. Moreover, there were supreme powerhouses guarding it. Even celestial masters couldn't break in like this. After Yi Shiwen entered this world of swordsmanship, he walked along the way and looked around. This world was not illusory, but real. Naturally, it had its own uniqueness. Soon, a figure appeared in front of Yi Shiwen's eyes. It was a tall and straight figure with a treasured sword on his back. His eyes were like the eyes of an eagle, and they were scanning the surroundings. Everything in the world was seen by him. He was like the incarnation of sword. Yi Shiwen was actually very familiar with this temperament. His sword incarnation was actually like this, but the aura of the sword venerable was far less tyrannical than this person in front of him. "Friend, where did you come from?" This person looked at Yi Shiwen. His tone was also like sword, incomparably sharp and unstoppable. "I came from outer space. As for why I came, I think you should be very clear." Yi Shiwen didn't beat around the bush and said directly. This was because he had already seen that this person should not be anyone else. It should be the tool spirit of the Sword of Fate, which had now turned into a treasure demon. "You are this generation's middle heavenly master?" "No, he just came some time ago." "Don't tell me that he is already dead." The tool spirit of the Sword of Fate also said bluntly. Chapter 3748. When the sword was unsheathed, the heavens fell and the earth cracked. Ghosts wailed and gods howled. This was the sword that once belonged to a middle heavenly venerate. That middle heavenly venerate had used the Sword of Fate to sever fate and suppress all resistance in the world. He was the Fortune Heavenly Monarch's follower, and he was the second person to step into the half-step sovereign realm after the Fortune Heavenly Monarch. The power of the Sword of Fate was unimaginable. Not only was the sword stained with the blood of emperors and heavenly venerables, it was also stained with the blood of half-step sovereign realm experts. What kind of glorious existence was this? With just this sword, no one dared to underestimate his existence. "There is no reason for my Tao to yield to others. Since you want my sword, you can exchange your life for it." The spirit of the Sword of Fate erupted. With a roar, the world shook and cracks appeared everywhere. This world of sword Tao that had been built for countless years completely collapsed at this moment. The sword Tao creatures turned into countless rays of light and returned to the body of the Sword of Fate, causing its power to soar to a terrifying level. One sword could seriously injure or even kill a peak heavenly venerable. If it was in the hands of a middle heavenly venerable, the power would be unimaginable. It wasn't without reason that the Sword of Fate's artifact spirit was so confident. Ordinary peak Empyreans weren't a match for it. In this world of the treasury, it was enough to proclaim itself as a king. It could continuously evolve the world of Sword Tao until it transcended. It might even have the chance to step into the half-step sovereign realm. This was a great opportunity, but the heavens gave everyone the same trial. If the spirit of the Sword of Fate wanted to step into the half-step sovereign realm like its master, it had to face many tribulations. Even Yi Shiwen could guess that he had become one of these tribulations. He didn't want to destroy this miracle, but since the spirit of the Sword of Fate was so stubborn, he had no other choice. Boom! A terrifying aura burst out from Yi Shiwen's body. The monstrous aura shocked many of the treasure demons in the treasury. Many treasure demons were trembling. This was a battle at the peak. Even though their original bodies were Tao artifacts of extreme experts and could be considered experienced and knowledgeable, in front of these two auras, they could only crawl on the ground. There was no other possibility. It's that outsider. Did he go against the Sword of Destiny? Sure enough, an expert at his level would have seen all kinds of treasures and divine materials. Therefore, he couldn't have come for us. If it's not the Great Fortune Robe, then it's the Sword of Destiny. What has happened in the outside world? The Sword of Fate has been here for many years, and the Fortune Divine Dynasty has never shown any intention of letting the Sword of Fate out. But now, they actually send a Middle Empyrean to subdue the Sword of Fate. Something earth-shattering must have happened. Since the Sword of Destiny has been found, the Great Fortune Robe won't be able to escape. Judging by the pace, it's very likely to be used to deal with half-step sovereigns. Although this person is very strong, whether it's the Sword of Fate or the Great Fortune Robe, I'm afraid that they won't just let him be. When that time comes, there will be another great battle. The treasure demons in the world of the treasury withdrew from their own worlds, their own countries, and their own sections. However, in the void, their divine senses were constantly communicating. For them, this matter was equally shocking. Clang! The Sword of Destiny was finally unsheathed, and a burst of buzzing sounds erupted. In an instant, a 10 million meter long torrent of Sword Tao directly bombarded towards Yi Shiwen. Refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, Yi Shiwen didn't move at all. Above his head, the martial sovereign seal continuously rotated, directly resisting this astonishing torrent of Sword Tao. This torrent of Sword Tao couldn't hurt Yi Shiwen. Meanwhile, Yi Shiwen directly rushed towards the tool spirit of the Sword of Fate. He didn't try to resist the Sword of Destiny head-on. Although his virtuous tyrant form was tyrannical, it wasn't worth it to resist head-on. If the Sword of Destiny could be so easily resisted, then it wouldn't have caught his attention. That's why he specifically came here to look for its value. He chose to defeat the spirit of the Sword of Destiny. If there was a weakness of the Sword of Destiny, then it would undoubtedly be this spirit. 6 Paths of Reincarnation Fist. Yi Shiwen roared, and a huge 6 paths of reincarnation formed behind him. The wheel constantly rotated, and with every rotation, endless power poured into Yi Shiwen's arm, transforming into terrifying power. This fist pierced through the heavens and the earth. This fist directly triggered reincarnation, directly crushing the heavens and the earth, and directly rushed towards the spirit of the Sword of Destiny. The spirit of the Sword of Destiny instantly felt the terrifying threat of Yi Shiwen's fist. If it was hit by Yi Shiwen's fist, it would most likely be killed. You're courting death. The spirit of the Sword of Destiny revealed a somewhat sinister smile. However, it wasn't the slightest bit afraid. In its life, it had followed the former middle heavenly master and defeated too many strong enemies. As it waved the Sword of Destiny in its hand, in an instant, billions of splashes of brilliance splashed out, filling the entire space. The sword light directly met the 6 paths of reincarnation fist. Clang! A loud roar sounded, and the sword light slashed on the fist. The sword of destiny broke through the 6 paths of reincarnation, and with unparalleled strength, it fell on Yi Shiwen's fist without losing any momentum. Drip, drip! Blood dripped from the fist. Yi Shiwen's fist was cut open, and blood dripped from the wound. As expected of the sword of destiny, it can actually injure me, Yi Shiwen said with a mischievous smile. In fact, he couldn't remember when was the last time he was injured. Most of his injuries were actually caused by using the supreme ancestral symbol, which caused him to injure himself. It was very rare to be injured by an outsider, especially after cultivating the meritorious tyrant form Golden Body. This kind of situation was even rarer. Even if it was an ordinary Heavenly Master Dao tool, he could forcibly resist it without being injured, and the Sword of Destiny could injure him. Most importantly, Yi Shiwen also knew that the Sword of Destiny could only display its basic power. If it was in the hands of the former Middle Heavenly Master, it would be truly invincible, and no one would be able to stop it. Yi Shiwen was slightly surprised, but even more surprised was that the spirit of the Sword of Destiny opposite him could only cut Yi Shiwen's skin with his full strength. In his estimation, the sword should have directly cut off Yi Shiwen's arm. If it was an ordinary Heavenly Master, he would have been cut in half along with the entire body. He was too confident in the amazing power of the Sword of Destiny. The more he knew about the power of the Sword of Destiny, the more confident he was. He didn't expect Yi Shiwen to be able to block it with his bare hands. He was simply a monster. In the world of the treasure house, he had been unrivaled for many years. Except for the good fortune treasure robe, who could stop his edge. He didn't expect that there would be such a person in the outside world. Even when the former Middle Heavenly Master was still in power, when the Fortune God dynasty was at its peak and full of talents, there were only a few people who could stop the edge of the Sword of Destiny. The power of the Sword of Destiny is indeed good. Unfortunately, it has lost a master, and its power is greatly reduced for no reason. What a pity! Yi Shiwen faintly smiled. The skin on his fist squirmed unceasingly, pushing out the sword chi. His injury was restored to its original state. It wasn't a big wound. It was just that the sword chi of the Sword of Destiny was somewhat difficult to deal with. The spirit of the Sword of Destiny suddenly changed his expression. Yi Shiwen was looking down on him. It's just the beginning. Don't be too proud. The spirit of the Sword of Destiny roared. In an instant, the treasure aura of heaven and earth gathered into his body. The whole world, the universe, the chaos, everything was sealed. Yi Shiwen suddenly felt as if he had fallen into a swamp. He couldn't move at all, as if there was a force that was tightly binding him. Sword of Destiny, lend me your power. One sword to cut the world. The spirit of the Sword of Destiny chanted in a low voice. The power on his body grew stronger and stronger. The sword aura surged into a pillar and directly rushed into the world. It was as if it could destroy the entire world of the treasure house. This was his hidden technique. Tyrannical. It was really too strong. Yi Shiwen instantly felt that he had been locked by a terrifying sword intention. However, he wasn't afraid. In his body, the spirit shone brightly, igniting everything. It directly burned the restriction around him into nothingness. I've heard that the Sword of Destiny contains 3 sword techniques. They are cut the world, cut the chaos, and cut the fate. Let me have a taste of them. Yi Shiwen's figure moved, smashing the void. His chi and blood swept out like a vast ocean, shocking the treasure demons in the world of the treasure house. Many treasure demons were dumbfounded. They couldn't imagine how Yi Shiwen could be so powerful just by relying on his physical body. At the moment when Yi Shiwen moved, the Sword of Destiny finally moved. It directly slashed towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen didn't dodge. Or rather, he couldn't dodge. This sword had locked the world. No one could escape. They could only face it head-on. This was also the terrifying part of the 3 Swords of Destiny. In the past, the former Middle Heavenly Lord relied on these 3 sword techniques to sweep away all strong enemies. The number of people who could receive the 3rd sword, Cut the Fate, could be counted on one hand. Yi Shiwen had only heard of it. He had never seen it in person. For him, the more tyrannical the sword of destiny was, the better it was. Only then would he be able to rely on it in the upcoming battle. Boom! This sword engulfed everything. The world collapsed. All the rules, laws, rules, and all the fetters were cut into powder by this sword. Chapter 3749. Rumble. The entire world of the treasure vault was violently shaking. Endless power spread out. Countless treasure demons could only tremble under this attack. They were afraid that the shock waves would affect them, but they couldn't help but widen their eyes. They wanted to see clearly what had happened and whether Yi Shiwen had died under this sword. Suddenly, at this moment, a huge hand stretched out from the boundless sword aura and directly crushed the terrifying sword aura into powder. A figure flew out from the void. It was Yi Shiwen. In an instant, the law of speed was evolved to the extreme, and he rushed in front of the sword of destiny's spirit. What? Everyone was shocked. They didn't dare to imagine that someone could be so tyrannical. Even a peak heavenly venerable wouldn't be able to block this sword and would be killed. However, the fact was that Yi Shiwen had grasped the heaven and earth chopping sword and turned it into powder. Moreover, he still had the strength to counterattack. How is this possible? The Sword of Fate's artifact spirit's eyes widened in disbelief. Even during the Fortune Divine Dynasty's golden age, when Middle Heavenly Venerables had fought against foreign worlds and ancient eras, the number of people who could block the Sword of Fate could be counted on one's fingers, much less block it so easily. Don't you understand? Cutting the heaven and earth is indeed strong, but you've restricted the Sword of Destiny's performance. This is all you can do. Yi Shiwen roared. At this moment, everything between the heavens and the earth was suppressed by him. His strength made everyone thoroughly terrified. Yi Shiwen blasted out a fist, igniting the void. The terrifying fist energy swept across the entire world and directly blasted in front of the Sword of Destiny's spirit. Puffed. The Sword of Destiny's spirit spat out a mouthful of blood essence. It could already feel how terrifying Yi Shiwen's fist was, but now it had the opportunity to truly feel the terror of this fist. It proved that its guess was correct. The wisps of Heavenly Venerable's blood essence sprayed between heaven and earth. It was a ghastly sight. The tool spirit of the Sword of Destiny was unconvinced. It was even more indignant. If it had been at its peak, then even with Yi Shiwen's current strength, its sword would have been enough to split Yi Shiwen into two halves. But now, Yi Shiwen was able to inflict heavy injuries on him. Was it really, as Yi Shiwen had said? Was he really inferior to the celestial masters of the previous generation? Could it be that his Sword of Destiny was restricted? The tool spirit of the Sword of Fate was sent flying upside down. However, Yi Shiwen didn't let him off. Since the opposite party refused a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit, then don't blame him for being impolite. This was the most important method he had to deal with a half-step ruler. He could not afford to make any mistakes. Yi Shiwen trampled down with his foot. He wanted to trample the tool spirit of the Sword of Fate to death. He then transformed it into the magical power of the Law of World. Seeing this, the artifact spirit of the Sword of Destiny didn't dare to stay any longer. It bit the tip of its tongue and spat a mouthful of blood onto the Sword of Destiny. Instantly, the Sword of Destiny grew larger and larger in the void. Its power also increased along with the wind, reaching an extremely terrifying level. Slash the chaos. The Sword of Fate transformed into a dreadful attack and blasted towards Yi Shiwen's foot that was trampling down. Bang! Yi Shiwen's law-form world was broken in an instant with a loud explosion. The sword continued to slash towards Yi Shiwen at an astonishing speed. Its momentum didn't diminish at all. It was as if it was going to split the entire world in half. This was the slash the chaos of the three swords of destiny. It was even more terrifying than the slash of the heaven and earth. If it was used in the chaos, this sword would be even more terrifying. Rumble. The sword once again drowned Yi Shiwen. This is the slash the chaos. The Sword of Destiny has been here for many years, but I've never seen it use the slash the chaos. No matter what kind of enemy it is, it can be defeated by the slash of destiny. I remember now. Before my master died, I once followed him to conquer the world. At that time, I saw the slash the chaos. Many treasure monsters exclaimed in surprise. But this moment, two huge golden hands suddenly tore everything apart. They burst out and tore the slash of chaos apart. Yi Shiwen's figure flew out from within. All the treasure monsters were even more shocked. How strong is he? The slash of heaven and earth can't do anything to him. The slash of chaos can't do anything to him either. Could it be that he can only be defeated by the slash of destiny? Rumor has it that the slash of destiny can even kill half-step sovereigns. How can there be such a tyrannical existence in the outside world? And he's not even a peak heavenly master. Even the Lord of Destiny wasn't this strong. No, the Lord of Destiny is definitely not as strong as him in this realm. My God, how can there be such a person in the outside world? Are we really ignorant? After Yi Shiwen tore the sword energy apart, he looked at the Sword of Destiny and said, "The slash of chaos is not bad. But in your situation, can you still use the slash of chaos a third time?" The power of the three swords of destiny was indeed earth-shattering. If it wasn't for a monster like Yi Shiwen, even a middle heavenly master would most likely be seriously injured by the slash of chaos. If they were hit by the slash of destiny, the consequences would be unimaginable. They might even die. However, to unleash such a powerful attack, one would naturally have to pay a huge price. At this time, the figure of the Sword of Destiny's spirit was clearly a lot more illusory. This was because he was different from Yi Shiwen, who was born with a body. His body was condensed after birth. The two consecutive slashes, coupled with the serious injuries he had suffered from Yi Shiwen before, were already in a state of being an arrow at the end of its flight. Of course, I can use the slash a third time. The Sword of Destiny's spirit's whole body was burning. The world was roaring, and a terrifying power was boiling. It even surpassed the state of the slash of chaos. At this time, the Sword of Destiny's spirit hadn't used the slash of chaos a third time. It was already so terrifying before it was used. If it was used, the consequences would simply be unimaginable. You've already reached this point. Do you still want to use the slash a third time? Yi Shiwen said loudly. Of course. As long as I can kill you, everything will be worth it. You are my destiny. After killing you, my cultivation will advance by leaps and bounds. The Sword of Destiny's spirit roared. The Sword of Destiny in his hand finally slashed down, drowning Yi Shiwen in an instant. This was the most terrifying attack, a terrifying attack that was known to be able to kill a half-step ruler. A river of destiny appeared in front of everyone. It was like the manifestation of the heavenly Tao. This river of destiny recorded everyone's existence. Some could break free from life and death, but no one could escape from the river of destiny. Therefore, no one could escape the bombardment of this river of destiny. This was the last move of the three swords of destiny, slash of destiny. It actually drew the river of destiny to attack. It was truly a dazzling attack. Die! The tool spirit of the sword of fate roared. He was boiling with excitement. He had poured everything he had into this sword. He had poured all of his faith into it. He wanted to prove that Yi Shiwen wasn't the one who had restricted the sword of fate. The power of this sword drowned the heavens and the earth. It was like a cage, imprisoning and destroying everything. However, just when everyone thought that this sword was going to end everything, an intense golden light tore through the river of fate and pierced through everything. Then came a second, and then a third. In the blink of an eye, countless beams of golden light tore through the river of fate, reducing it to dust. Countless talisman epics laws floated in the sky, and Yi Shiwen's figure appeared in these talisman epics laws. Slash of Destiny is indeed powerful. It actually forced me to use the supreme ancestral symbol. Otherwise, I might have been seriously injured. This sword is said to be able to kill a half-step ruler. It's not a lie. Yi Shiwen faintly said. His body was protected by the supreme ancestral symbol. That sword attack a moment ago was indeed terrifying. Even though he had cultivated the golden body of the virtuous tyrant form, he couldn't block it. Therefore, he had no choice but to use the supreme ancestral symbol. This was already extremely difficult. He didn't even use the supreme ancestral symbol to defeat the Heaven City Lord. He only relied on his own strength to suppress a peak heavenly venerate. If he was a middle heavenly venerate, he would indeed be able to kill a half-step ruler. What? You can actually block the slash of destiny? Impossible, impossible. The sword of destiny's spirit roared and spat out a mouthful of blood essence. His entire body was torn apart. The sword of destiny's spirit was already an arrow at the end of its flight after using the slash of destiny. Now, he suffered a backlash and his body instantly exploded. At this moment, Yi Shiwen formed a giant hand and grabbed at the sword of destiny. Suddenly, another huge hand appeared out of thin air, and it actually wanted to grab the sword of destiny before the first one. You want to compete with me in speed? Yi Shiwen sneered and instantly increased his speed. The law of speed manifested in an instant, and then he grabbed the sword of destiny in his hand. Buzz! The moment the sword of destiny was in Yi Shiwen's hand, it suddenly erupted with countless sword lights, forming a terrifying torrent that slashed at Yi Shiwen. This was to resist Yi Shiwen and prevent him from controlling the sword of destiny. However, Yi Shiwen was not afraid at all. He opened his mouth and swallowed the torrent of swordsmanship into his stomach. Then, his palm turned into a huge talisman with the word seal on it, sealing a little bit of the sword of destiny's spirit. In an instant, the sword of destiny stopped struggling. In the end, it couldn't resist Yi Shiwen's subjugation. Come out. Do you still want to hide? Yi Shiwen looked into the void and said. Chapter 3750. As soon as Yi Shiwen's voice fell, a figure appeared in the void. This figure had just appeared, but it already had the power to suppress the entire world. His body carried a disdainful aura. This kind of rich king's ways aura was even stronger than the sword of destiny. Moreover, his body also carried a strong fortune aura. Yi Shiwen was also very familiar with that face. It was the Fortune Heaven Lord. Although Yi Shiwen had never seen the Fortune Heaven Lord, he had seen the original spirit of the Fortune Heaven Lord. This person in front of him looked exactly the same as the Fortune Heaven Lord. Naturally, he couldn't be the Fortune Heaven Lord. Therefore, it was very obvious that he was the tool spirit of the Fortune Treasure Robe. You still dare to come out after watching for so long. You're really brave. Yi Shiwen said. He held the sword of fate in his hand, and the power of the supreme ancestral symbol on his body was exuding a terrifying power. At this moment, Yi Shiwen was unprecedentedly tyrannical. On the other side, the tool spirit of the sword of fate had recondensed into a solid body. He just stared at Yi Shiwen with a pair of red eyes. To be precise, he stared at the sword of fate in Yi Shiwen's hand. Yi Shiwen turned to look at the tool spirit of the sword of fate and said, "Don't stare at me. I am indeed your doom. But isn't it also an opportunity for you? For you, the sword of fate has indeed made you who you are, but at the same time, it has also restricted you from going further. Your Tao comes from the sword of fate, but to be more precise, it comes from its former master, the former middle heavenly master. You think that you have walked on this path very smoothly, but don't you understand? Every extreme powerhouse is different. If you follow the path of others, you will never reach the peak. Only by breaking free can you possibly reach the peak." The tool spirit of the sword of fate trembled slightly. It seemed to be shocked by Yi Shiwen's words. It wasn't that it hadn't thought about these things, but it was too late to change at that time. Moreover, every successful cultivator was very extreme and only believed in their own Tao. If Yi Shiwen hadn't defeated it today, Yi Shiwen's words wouldn't have affected it in the slightest. After a long time, its body finally stopped trembling. It already knew that Yi Shiwen was right. Although it was born from a sword of fate, it didn't mean that it should walk the same path as the former middle heavenly master. It restricted the sword of fate, but at the same time, the sword of fate also restricted its development. If it kept walking on this path, it would never reach the end. There would always be someone walking in front of it on this path. his so-called strength, was essentially just the strength of the sword of destiny, and he himself could not even withstand a single blow. This was an act of neglecting the essentials and focusing on trifles. Yishuin was very clear about this point, because Yimo had once been confused like this. However, Yimo had seen through all this very early on. Therefore, he had started to walk on his own path very early on. In the end, he had successfully broken through to the Emperor realm. In terms of cultivation, he had actually surpassed the cultivation of the Devil King. The spirit of the Sword of Fate couldn't surpass the former Middle Heavenly Master, no matter how much it cultivated. This was the essential difference between the two. Although Yimo's current cultivation was far inferior to the spirit of the Sword of Fate, its potential for development was far beyond the former. Thank you for your guidance. If it wasn't for your guidance, I don't know how many years I would be trapped in this cage. You can take the Sword of Fate with you. I won't interfere with the Sword of Fate anymore. You can use the full power of the Sword of Fate. After speaking, the spirit of the Sword of Fate took a deep look at Yishuin and the spirit of the Good Fortune treasure robe. Then it turned around and left. When it left, it cut off all the connection between itself and the Sword of Fate. It was the Sword of Fate that made it, and the Sword of Fate that made it. However, from today onwards, it would touch this world as an independent cultivator, and not the spirit of the Sword of Fate. Yishuin nodded. He could feel that all the spirits in the Sword of Fate had been erased. As long as he imprinted his spirit into it, he would be able to completely control the Sword of Fate. For him, the Sword of Fate had given birth to its own spiritual wisdom. This was also a great miracle. He didn't want to erase this miracle. As long as the spirit of the Sword of Fate was willing to turn back, then he would be willing to let it go and give it a chance. However, if it was still stubborn and obstinate, Yishuin wouldn't mind killing it. Then, Yishuin looked at the spirit of the Good Fortune treasure robe on the other side and said, "You still dare to come out at this time. You're quite courageous." How can I talk about being courageous at this time? If I'm not wrong, you should be here for the Good Fortune treasure robe and the Sword of Fate. So, what does it matter when I appear? The spirit of the Good Fortune treasure robe said in a neither fast nor slow manner. Obviously, it had seen through everything. Yishuin would definitely find it. So, what difference would it make if it appeared at any time? In fact, it should have appeared earlier. At least, it could have stopped Yishuin from attacking the Sword of Fate. I should have appeared earlier. It's a bit stressful to deal with you alone now. The spirit of the Good Fortune treasure robe said faintly. Didn't you hear what I said just now? I don't know how much higher your starting point is compared to an ordinary creature, but this is your advantage and also your shackles. If you can't find your own path, then you can only stay in their shadows forever. Yishuin said, "You don't have to say these words because I'm not the Sword of Fate. I won't be swayed by your words." The Good Fortune treasure robe continued. As you said, everyone has their own path. Every extreme powerhouse has their own different path. Since you're not me, how do you know that my path won't work? Yishuin immediately understood. The spirit of the Good Fortune treasure robe was far more stubborn than the spirit of the Sword of Fate. His Tao was stronger, and he had even gradually comprehended his own path. So, it was impossible to convince him. Just like the Lord of Good Fortune, heaven couldn't change Yishuin's Tao. They had already reached the peak of perfection, far beyond everyone's imagination. However, Yishuin didn't intend to preach. It would be best if the other party could give him some pointers. Since he couldn't point it out, he could only defeat the other party. He couldn't retreat from this battle. There was no way out. Do you think you can stop me? If you retreat now and hand over the Good Fortune treasure robe, I can let you go. I have no way out. You'd better not test my patience, Yishuin said without any trace of politeness. If you want it, then do it yourself. For him, the Sword of Fate has become a burden because he can never surpass the original Middle Heavenly Master. But I'm different. I still have a long way to go. Even if I want to turn back, it's definitely not now. The spirit of the Good Fortune treasure robe said faintly. He was right. In any case, a Middle Heavenly Master couldn't compare to the Lord of Good Fortune Heaven. So, his path was much longer than the Sword of Fate. If that's the case, then I have no reason to hold back. I'll tell you now that your way of thinking is really ridiculous. Yi Shiwen said. In an instant he moved. With a bang, all the magic power in his body was burning. It directly manifested many strange phenomena. At the same time, he punched through the world. The world of the treasure house trembled. Countless treasure demons looked from afar. They trembled and didn't dare to approach. They could only watch Yi Shiwen erupt like a god. The stars in the world revolved with him. The fist pierced through the world and directly bombarded the front of the good fortune treasure robe. The terrible astral wind turned into a terrible tornado. The clothes on the spirit of the good fortune treasure robe fluttered in the wind. However, the spirit of the good fortune treasure robe didn't move. Soon, Yi Shiwen discovered that his fist seemed to have entered a quagmire. Just moving it was already very difficult. All the suns, moons, and stars in the world were blooming with the light of the Great Way. However, it was useless. This fist couldn't move forward. In terms of attack, I may not be comparable to the Sword of Fate. However, in terms of defense, I am far stronger than him. This is also the reason why you came looking for me. But it's useless. I may not be able to hurt you, but you can't do anything to me either. I'm already in an invincible position. The spirit of the good fortune treasure robe said indifferently. His tone was neither fast nor slow. He had already calculated everything. This was also the fundamental reason why he had dared to appear in front of Yi Shiwen. He had already calculated everything. Are you sure I can't do anything to you? Yi Shiwen roared. On his body, countless golden gung qi bloomed with a terrible light. In an instant, it directly broke the domain around the spirit of the good fortune treasure robe. The golden gung ancestral qi was unparalleled in attack. It was vividly reflected at this time. Yi Shiwen's fist broke through the domain of the good fortune's treasured robe's tool spirit in an instant. This fist disintegrated the previous one and swept out a dreadful frenzy. The power of 6 paths of reincarnation was added to his body. Then he bombarded the tool spirit of the good fortune's treasured robe with his fist. Clang! There was another loud roar. Then Yi Shiwen saw his fist directly hit an inch away from the spirit of the good fortune treasure robe. It couldn't move forward anymore. At this moment, an ancient treasured robe appeared on his body. The treasured robe was engraved with densely packed ancient incantations and traces of loss. Even the aura of the Great Way was being released, and it directly blocked Yi Shiwen's punch. This was the good fortune treasure robe. It wrapped the spirit in it. Chapter 3751. Under the protection of the good fortune treasure garment, the good fortune treasure garment's spirit opened its eyes and said, I've already said that you can't do anything to me. You can't break my defense either. I'm different from the Sword of Destiny. If his offense is unparalleled, then my defense is invincible. In the past, the good fortune Heavenly Lord relied on my help to defeat many strong enemies. There were even half-step sovereigns, let alone you. The good fortune treasure garment's spirit opened its eyes. They were profound, but without a trace of emotion. It just looked at Yi Shiwen indifferently, as if he was looking at an irrelevant person. It's really tricky, Yi Shiwen said, but it's impossible for me to give up. You were the one who attacked before. It's my turn now. The tool spirit of the good fortune's treasured clothes attacked Yi Shiwen as soon as he finished speaking. His physical body was naturally inferior to Yi Shiwen's virtuous gilded body. However, he wasn't afraid of a physical fight under the protection of the good fortune's treasure clothes. Universe creation palm. The good fortune treasure garment's spirit directly slammed his palm down. It was as if the world and the universe were violently reversed, and then it smashed down towards Yi Shiwen. You actually know Universe Creation Palm, Yi Shiwen said. I've followed the good fortune Heavenly Lord for many years. What's so strange about knowing Universe Creation Palm? The good fortune treasure garment's spirit didn't seem to care. In his opinion, he had followed the good fortune Heavenly Lord for many years. He himself was the evolution of the good fortune Heavenly Lord spirit, and had developed his own spiritual wisdom. What's so strange about him knowing Universe Creation Palm? This was an inheritance that came from his own body, not something that he had learned. That's true. Then take my palm, universe creation palm. Yi Shiwen also slammed his palm down. Although he didn't burn his king-level dragon vein, his current cultivation was already terrifying enough. When his palm slammed down, its power was equally terrifying. In fact, it was even more terrifying and powerful than the Good Fortune Cosmic Palm that was used by the Good Fortune Treasure Robe. Boom! The Fortune Universe Palm of both sides collided with each other. It was exactly the same, but it was equally terrifying. It seemed as if the entire primal chaos had just been born and the world was about to be reshaped. This was the most frightening thing for many of the treasure demons in the distance. In fact, it was even more terrifying than when Yi Shiwen had battled against the Sword of Destiny. The two of them were evenly matched. They did not move at all, clashing once more, allowing the palm force from both sides to turn into a torrent that swept through the surroundings. Yi Shiwen had practiced the virtuous gilded tyrant body. So, these astral winds and storms were useless against his body. Moreover, the tool spirit of the Good Fortune's treasure clothes was protected by the Good Fortune's treasure clothes. So, all the astral winds would naturally turn into nothingness. So, they couldn't hurt him. Yi Shiwen had already discovered that the tool spirit of the Good Fortune's treasured robe was also using the universe creation palm. However, it was obviously not on the same level as the one he was using. The universe creation palm used by the Good Fortune's treasured robe was obviously not the complete version. However, the one he had learned was the true complete version. Yi Shiwen thought about it for a while and understood that when the Good Fortune's treasure clothes refined the Good Fortune's treasure clothes, Lord of Good Fortune was only a half-step sovereign-level existence. So, the spirit that he had imprinted in the Good Fortune's treasure clothes was only at that level. At that time, the universe creation palm was obviously not perfect. It was not comparable to the universe creation palm that Yi Shiwen had learned later. That was left behind after the Good Fortune's treasure clothes had reached the sovereign level. Although the Good Fortune robe was Heavenly Lord Fortune Creation's personal Tao item, he later gave it up for some unknown reason. Instead, he refined the Good Fortune Creation scroll and left the Good Fortune treasure robe in this treasury. However, Yi Shiwen also discovered that the defensive power of the Good Fortune treasured robe was indeed amazing. He was stronger than the tool spirit of the Good Fortune treasured robe, whether it was his martial power or the might of the Good Fortune universe palm. However, the excess palm power would be absorbed by the Good Fortune treasured robe's tool spirit when it fell on the body of the Good Fortune treasured robe. It couldn't do anything to the tool spirit of the Good Fortune treasured robe. This was exactly what the Good Fortune treasure robe said before. It was already in an invincible position. No matter how Yi Shiwen attacked, it was impossible to hurt it. Although it might be difficult for it to hurt Yi Shiwen, who had cultivated the virtuous tyrant form golden body, it was enough to give Yi Shiwen a headache. In fact, the tool spirit of the Good Fortune precious robe could also use the Good Fortune universe palm. It could be said that it had both offensive and defensive abilities. However, it was a pity that Yi Shiwen also had both offensive and defensive abilities. In fact, he was even stronger than Yi Shiwen. Again, Yi Shiwen wasn't discouraged. He directly rushed forward again and fought with the tool spirit of the Good Fortune treasured robe. The tool spirit of the Good Fortune treasured robe also seemed to be boiling with fighting spirit. It relied on the amazing defensive power of the Good Fortune treasured robe. It simply didn't care. It didn't defend and only attack. It let Yi Shiwen's attacks fall on its body. Yi Shiwen was the same. He also fought in the same way. He didn't have much defense at all. He let the attacks fall on his virtuous tyrant form golden body. It couldn't do anything to Yi Shiwen. The two of them directly displayed a pure offensive battle. This shocking scene left many treasure demons dumbfounded. Whether it was the shocking defensive methods displayed by both sides or the reckless offensive methods displayed by both sides, they all shocked them. A whole new world was revealed to everyone. The physical cultivation was also equally terrifying after it had been enhanced to the extreme. Give up. You can't defeat me. Everything you're doing now is a waste of time. said the good fortune treasured robe calmly. Its eyes seemed to be able to see through everything in the world. In terms of the spiritual power of both sides, a battle of this level might even last until the end of time. After all, their spiritual power recovery speed was too fast. Waste of time? I don't think so. Eat my sword first. Yi Shiwen suddenly grabbed a long sword from the void. What else could it be if it wasn't the sword of fate? So what if it's the sword of fate? Even the sword of fate can't break my good fortune treasured robe. Roared the tool spirit of the good fortune treasured robe when it saw the sword of fate that Yi Shiwen had grabbed. Is that so? Eat my sword first. Slash the heaven and earth. Yi Shiwen's body bloomed with countless rays of sword principle. The treasure energy of the entire treasure house world was gathering towards his body. His body was like a huge whirlpool that could absorb all the treasure energy. He wasn't doing nothing when he was fighting the tool spirit of the good fortune treasured robe. On the contrary, he was refining the sword of fate while fighting. Without the interference of the tool spirit of the good fortune treasured robe, it was much easier for him to refine the sword of fate. However, he couldn't just imprint his spirit into it. That would only be considered as a preliminary mastery of the sword of fate. At most, he would only be able to display the most basic power of the sword of fate. In terms of offense, it might not be much different from the gung metal ancestral chi in his hand. His original intention of finding the sword of fate would be wasted. The real difficulty was the 3 swords of fate that were imprinted in the sword of fate. It was a terrifying move that could kill half-step sovereigns. Only by comprehending the 3 swords of fate could he display the full power of the sword of fate. Only then would he truly have the ability to kill half-step sovereigns. After burning hundreds of king-class dragon veins, he had only comprehended the most basic move of the 3 swords of fate, slash the heaven and earth. Even so, it was enough. Although it was only a basic move, the foundation depended on whose foundation it was. Boom! The sword directly slashed down, slashing towards the tool spirit of the good fortune treasured robe at lightning speed. The tool spirit of the good fortune treasured robe couldn't escape at all. Yi Shiwen's speed was too fast, and he directly sealed off the entire space. It was like he was in a deep swamp. There was nowhere to hide. At this moment, he could already feel the terrifying pressure that Yi Shiwen had felt before. This sword instantly drowned him, and the terrifying sword light filled the entire space. Slash the heaven and earth. He actually recreated slash the heaven and earth in such a short time, and it's even stronger than me. The tool spirit of the sword of fate couldn't help but be stunned when he saw this scene. Although he had already decided to not care, he couldn't help but be stunned when he felt slash the heaven and earth again on the battlefield. Although he was a tool spirit, it took him a long time to master slash the heaven and earth after he developed his own intelligence. After that, it took him a long time to gradually master slash the chaos and slash the fate. Now, Yi Shiwen had just seized the sword of fate, and he actually slashed the sword of fate. What kind of heaven-defying comprehension is this? He didn't know that Yi Shiwen had a mysterious space, and could only think that this was Yi Shiwen's comprehension. He couldn't help but be stunned. He only felt that it wasn't very shameful to lose to such a monster. After all, he was a monster. Perhaps there weren't many people who could compare with him since ancient times. At least his master, the former Middle Heavenly Master, was far less powerful than Yi Shiwen when he was in this realm. The sword light dissipated, and everyone only saw that the tip of the sword of fate directly tore the defense of the good fortune treasured robe. Although it was only for a moment, it was enough. For the good fortune treasured robe, its defense had completely collapsed. This was just the beginning. Soon, its treasured robe was densely covered with all kinds of cracks, and then the barrier collapsed in an instant. This is the time. Yi Shiwen saw the tool spirit protected by the good fortune treasured robe, and this was also the best opportunity. Of course, he wouldn't let go of this opportunity. He directly stepped out and slashed down with his sword. Puff! The tool spirit of the good fortune treasured robe widened his eyes. He still couldn't believe that he was defeated like this. He actually died like this. His body was cut in half, and it burned fiercely. After a while, it was burned to ashes, and his good fortune treasured robe quickly fell into Yi Shiwen's hands. Chapter 3752. The tool spirit of the good fortune robe was also killed by Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen put away the good fortune robe and shook his head. He couldn't help but feel a little pity. Whether it was the tool spirit of the sword of fate or the good fortune robe, they were too stubborn. They would rather die than surrender. Yi Shiwen didn't intend to kill them all, and there was no need for that. He only borrowed the power of the good fortune robe and the sword of fate. Although these two treasures were supreme treasures, they were treasures of the fortune divine dynasty, and he couldn't possess them indefinitely. Secondly, there was no need for him to do so. If he could break through to the 9th stage of the heavenly venerable realm, his karma tyrant physique's defense wouldn't be weaker than the fortune treasure robes, nor would it be weaker than the sword of fate's attack. Although these two treasures were good, they were not as useful as the supreme ancestral symbol. Unless it was the good fortune universe map, it would be of great help to Yi Shiwen. This was the power that he could rely on, and it was also the foundation of his existence. However, although Yi Shiwen felt a little pity, he didn't regret it. There were not many choices left for him. After taking the two treasures, Yi Shiwen didn't go out immediately. Instead, he immediately sat down and began to refine the two treasures. Although he had erased the tool spirits of the two treasures, it didn't mean that he could immediately control them. Yi Shiwen's body emitted bursts of golden light, and there were bursts of strange phenomena behind him. The light of the world tree and the 3,000 martial arts resonated with each other, illuminating the entire treasure house world. Vaguely, there were countless gods preaching. The sound of the preaching was getting louder and louder, and it spread throughout the treasure house world. Many treasure demons sat down and listened to the preaching with a respectful expression. The Tao was a mysterious thing. If you understood it, then you understood it. If you didn't, then you didn't understand it. Therefore, each treasure demon could hear different things from the preaching. Each had their own understanding. Many problems that had troubled these treasure demons for many years were solved by the chanting. Many treasure demons actually broke through on the spot. This was the so-called when a man achieves the Tao. His chickens and dogs also rise to heaven. Yi Shiwen had also entered a state of enlightenment while refining these two supreme treasures. Whether it was the Lord of Good Fortune Heaven or the former Middle Heavenly Master, both of them had integrated their great Tao into these two supreme treasures while refining them. Yi Shiwen could now come into contact with the great Tao while refining these two supreme treasures. For him, it was like a head-on blow. The great Taos of these two supreme masters could only be used as a reference for him. But what really made him enter into a state of enlightenment was the great Taos of half-step sovereign realm. It was a completely different level of realm. This was very important to Yi Shiwen. If the previous fight with the Heaven City Lord had made him understand what the half-step sovereign realm was, then the process of refining the two treasures had made him understand how to truly cross this realm. This was something that only Yi Shiwen could do. If it were someone else, even if they had a little idea, it was unknown how long it would take for them to reach that step. However, the great Tao left behind by the two great masters and the two supreme treasures had pointed out a bright path for him. In fact, it was a bright path. The key was that Yi Shiwen had the help of the mysterious space, which could help him continuously analyze this information. Every minute and every second, he could comprehend the Tao that others could comprehend for 10 years or even 100 years. But to achieve this effect, he had to burn the dragon veins in his body one by one. Even the king-level dragon veins, which were enough to make a big sect flourish, couldn't be used for long by Yi Shiwen. But this time, he didn't regret it. Other than the dragon veins, he still had 99 energy balls. This was a huge amount of wealth, enough to support his breakthrough. He had unprecedented wealth. Moreover, he was the temporary prime minister of the Fortune God dynasty. The Fortune God dynasty's resources were at his disposal, so he naturally didn't lack these resources. For a heavenly venerable, a king-level dragon vein was already an extremely pure energy. However, these energy balls seemed to have been purified even further. Yishiwen guessed that they were formed after being purified by a half-step sovereign. It was absolutely impossible for them to be formed naturally. Among half-step sovereigns, this was probably a hard currency. 10 years passed in the blink of an eye. Yishiwen had truly spent 10 years in the world of the treasury. In these 10 years, Yishiwen didn't move an inch. He was frantically trying to comprehend the laws of half-step sovereigns contained within the two treasures. After a long time, he finally opened his eyes and let out a long breath. In an instant, the entire world of the treasury changed color, and all the treasure demons woke up from their preaching state. Their faces lit up with pleasant surprise. Although it was only 10 years, it was more than what they had gained in 100,000 years. For these treasure demons, because their grand daos were incomplete, every step they took was especially difficult. Many treasure demons had already reached the same realm as their previous masters, and their previous master's realm had also trapped them, making it impossible for them to break through. Many of them hadn't made further breakthroughs for tens of thousands of years. However, after listening to Yishiwen's sermon for 10 years, they had made breakthroughs one after another. Those who hadn't made breakthroughs had also found their own path. This feeling was too mysterious. If possible, they couldn't wait to continue for a longer period of time. But the moment Yishiwen ended his preaching, they also woke up from the process. Many thanks for Lord's teachings. These treasure demons stood up and saluted in Yishiwen's direction. Whether these treasure demons were usually gentle, well-educated, or tyrannical, at this moment, they all saluted respectfully. This was respect for the Tao preacher. Yishiwen nodded. These treasure demons had gained a lot in this period of time, but it was only a small amount that slipped through the cracks of Yishiwen's fingers. He had truly gained the most. In these 10 years, he had truly understood his own Tao, and breaking through to the 9th realm was only a matter of time. Once he broke through to the 9th realm, he would have the strength of a half-step sovereign. Time. What I lack the most right now is time. Inside Yishiwen's body, an energy ball was directly grabbed by the giant hand of law and then swallowed into his stomach. Suddenly, it turned into a violent torrent of energy that dispersed into his limbs and bones. This violent torrent of energy helped him to break through from the 8th realm to the 9th realm. He already had a clear path to break through to the 9th realm, but what he lacked was time. Give me a little more time. Just a little more time will do. Yishiwen clenched his fists. Only he knew how much he longed for time. Although he had saved countless years of time with the help of the mysterious space, it was still not enough for him. He still lacked the time. The gap between a half-step sovereign and a peak heavenly venerable was too great. It was like a mortal trying to traverse the galaxy, a hopeless situation that could not be crossed. Right now, he had forged a battleship for himself, but the problem was that he needed time to traverse the endless galaxy, and would those people give him such an opportunity? Suddenly, the entire world of the treasure house began to shake violently, as if the end of the world was coming. A terrifying force continuously transmitted from a distant space into the world of the treasure house. Yishiwen frowned slightly. This was the deepest part of the Fortune Divine Capital. How could anyone transmit the aftermath of an attack to this place? Suddenly, as if he had thought of something, his body swayed, and he appeared at the entrance of the treasure house. At the entrance, the war elder was already waiting. As soon as it saw Yishiwen coming out, it immediately sealed the world of the treasure house. This was to prevent the treasure demon from suddenly running out of it. What the hell happened? Yishiwen frowned and asked. The primal chaos overlord has come out, replied the war elder. Yishiwen's brows relaxed, but he was not surprised. From a sudden eruption of such a huge wave, he had already guessed that the primal chaos overlord had come out. To cause such a huge movement, there was no other possibility except for a half-step sovereign-level expert. Although a peak heavenly venerable was powerful, if they want to show off in front of the Fortune Divine Capital, only death awaited them. And if it was a foreign half-step sovereign from the ancient era, it was even more impossible. They could not pass through the 10 great divine cities and suddenly launch a sneak attack here without him receiving any news. It really is him. Yishuan nodded solemnly and said, "Come, let's go out and take a look. It's been 10 years, and I also want to test my progress in these 10 years. At the same time, I also want to see how powerful this world-famous primal chaos overlord is." Even the Fortune Divine Monarch was afraid of him in the past. The War Elder could not help but be shocked when he heard Yishuan's words, because he knew that Yishuan must have made great progress in these 10 years. Otherwise, he would not be able to say such words. At this time, Yishuan's progress was definitely good news for the Fortune Divine Dynasty, especially when a middle heavenly venerable was in deep seclusion and would not come out unless it was a matter of life and death. The two of them moved extremely quickly, and in the blink of an eye, they had already arrived at the edge of the Fortune Divine capital. At this time, they could see a domineering figure floating above the entire Fortune Divine capital. Chapter 37:53. At this time, as far as the eye could see, it could be said that everything was in ruins. Everything had been destroyed by violence. It was incomparably miserable. 1/10 of the entire Fortune Divine capital had been destroyed. The array formations and boundaries had been activated, but it seemed like they couldn't stop the onslaught. The last time the foreign biological soldiers had besieged the Fortune Divine capital, they had even killed their way into the Fortune Divine capital. However, they hadn't caused much damage because the entire battlefield was confined to a very small area. This time, however, it was different. 1/10 of the area had been destroyed. Based on the size of the Fortune Divine capital, 1/10 of the area had been destroyed. This meant that at least billions of lives had been lost. Moreover, these were the elites and elites of the entire Fortune Divine Dynasty. They were the direct descendants of the direct descendants. Such a loss would have been enough to make a middle heavenly venerable vomit blood. However, at this time, Yishuan and the War Venerable only looked at everything in front of them with solemn expressions. They weren't surprised. If it had been from the outside, even a half-step sovereign expert wouldn't have been able to cause such shocking damage in such a short time. Otherwise, the Fortune Divine capital wouldn't have been known as the world's #1 dragon's pool and tiger's den by the foreign experts. Even a peak heavenly venerable wouldn't have been able to return after being discovered. Even a half-step sovereign would find it difficult to break through the Fortune Divine capital's defenses, especially when there were many heavenly venerables overseeing it. This was because the Fortune Divine capital's defenses were chain-like. All the defensive boundaries and array formations were linked. Even if it suffered a huge attack in an instant, it could be dispersed to other places. Therefore, it was very difficult to break through. It was originally set up by the Fortune Divine Lord, and later reinforced by many heavenly venerables, so it was already abnormally strong. However, the chaotic overlord was different. He was sealed inside the Fortune Divine capital, so he had fought his way out from inside the Fortune Divine capital. Naturally, he would cause such a shocking number of casualties. I was careless. I originally thought that he wouldn't come out so quickly. Who knew that he would break free faster than I expected? Yishuan said as he looked at the chaotic overlord in the sky. This matter can't be blamed on the Eastern Heavenly Venerable. We didn't consider it thoroughly. At this time, Middle Celestial Venerate's trusted aide, Mr. Huang, who had not been seen for a while, also appeared here. It wasn't just Mr. Huang. Several other heavenly venerables and imperial monarchs in the Creation Divine capital had also gathered here. Originally, when the primal chaos overlord suddenly broke free, it caught them off guard. Even a few imperial emperors were casually pinched to death by it, and a heavenly venerable was severely injured. This was the reason for such a shocking loss. It doesn't matter. You don't need to stay here. Go back to your respective positions and preside over the array formation and enchantments. I will deal with the primal chaos overlord, said Yishuan. If these formations and boundaries were to display their full power, they would need the protection of these extreme Taoists. These extreme-grade powerhouses flew toward their respective posts. Although they had not practiced before, these people were very powerful, so it did not hinder them from quickly understanding what they should do. Yi Shiwen looked up and saw that the primal chaos overlord was floating in midair. A terrifying power was suppressing the entire creation divine capital. This was only the creation divine capital. If it were any other place, even if it were the ancestral land of a great sect, it would directly collapse. It would be impossible to resist. For a newly developed place like the human race, it would be conquered in less than one round. It would be impossible to resist. It was indeed very strong. At the level of the primal chaos overlord, he could single-handedly prosper the country. When the creation heavenly lord founded the creation divine dynasty, his cultivation was only at this level. At this level, he was actually at the peak of countless eras. The number of people who could produce such a figure could be counted on one's fingers. There were even some weaker eras that only produced one such figure in an entire era. Masters who reached the sovereign level were even rarer. There might not even be one in an era. Therefore, the primal chaos overlord dared to block the entire creation divine capital without fear. The primal chaos overlord was very domineering. Although it was not the first time Yi Shiwen saw the primal chaos overlord, it was the first time he saw the primal chaos overlord's true body. The primal chaos overlord's incarnation was not worth mentioning compared to the true body. It did not even have 1,000th of the true body strength. The primal chaos overlord opened his mouth and suddenly appeared on the land of the central region. Every time he opened his mouth, there would be living beings within thousands of miles directly turned into a mass of blood fog, forming a torrent that courageously rushed into the primal chaos overlord's mouth. The blood essence of countless living beings within thousands of miles were all swallowed by the primal chaos overlord. After that, it could be clearly seen that the primal chaos overlord's aura had recovered a lot and was much more tyrannical. Obviously, during the period of time when it was suppressed by the creation heavenly lord, the primal chaos overlord had no way to achieve basic recovery. And the primal chaos overlord had been recovering day by constantly swallowing the blood essence of these living beings, and was becoming stronger and stronger. It could be said that this is the primal chaos overlord's weakest moment. I can't let him continue to do whatever he wants. With the primal chaos overlord's own strength, it was unknown how many living beings it would have to swallow to recover to its peak. It would definitely be an abyss of suffering. However, Yi Shiwen discovered that the primal chaos overlord was not leaving at this time, nor was he attacking the divine capital of creation. He was only swallowing the blood essence of living beings to recover his strength, while constantly chanting and forming hand seals. Soon, Yi Shiwen discovered that above the divine capital of creation, the shadow of the creation universe map was faintly discernible, protecting the entire divine capital of creation, not allowing the primal chaos overlord to take a step further. And the primal chaos overlord's target was also the creation universe map. Yi Shiwen immediately understood that the primal chaos overlord actually wanted to subdue the creation universe map. If it was during the divine dynasty's most prosperous period, it would have been impossible. But now, the divine dynasty could not find anyone who could contend against the primal chaos overlord. If the primal chaos overlord continued to refine it for a long time, it might really be possible. And this was something that Yi Shiwen would absolutely not allow. Yi Shiwen took a step forward and instantly appeared above the divine capital of creation. The sword of destiny directly emerged in his hand, and he suddenly swung it down. In an instant, the weather changed, and the world seemed to be split open. This sword almost seemed to flash, and directly appeared in front of the primal chaos overlord. The primal chaos overlord also reacted in an instant. Instantly, a chaotic force field appeared around his body, and the sword directly sank into the chaotic force field. Although it was blocked by him, it also blocked the primal chaos overlord's actions. This made it impossible for him to continue to attack the creation universe map. He couldn't help but frown slightly. One should know that he wouldn't even look at the attacks of ordinary heavenly masters, and he wouldn't care at all. Although he was not at his peak now, ordinary people could not easily injure him. Only peak heavenly masters could possibly pose a great threat to him, but this time, the middle heavenly masters didn't appear. Although he didn't know the reason, it was good news for him. He could take the creation universe map as his own in one go. If he waited for the other supremes to rush over, the situation would be a different matter. Although those supremes were only peak heavenly masters, they carried the huge destiny of the Fortune God dynasty. Even if they couldn't kill him, they could still pose a sufficient threat to him. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart. From the point of establishing the Fortune God dynasty by the Fortune Heavenly Lord, he was already inferior. In the past, he could also be said to be a king in the Fortune world, an invincible figure, but at that time he was not able to establish a behemoth like the Fortune God dynasty that encompassed more than half of the Fortune world. He and several other half-step sovereign-level figures each had their own forces, but compared to the Fortune God dynasty, they were obviously far inferior. Moreover, he wholeheartedly wanted to go one step further and break through to the sovereign level. Who would have thought that a junior like the Fortune Heavenly Lord would surpass him and establish a behemoth like the Fortune God dynasty? From the moment he was defeated, he knew that he wasn't big enough. Originally, the Fortune Creation Heavenly Monarch was only on par with them, and they were evenly matched. However, ever since the establishment of the Fortune Divine Dynasty, Fortune Heavenly Monarch had represented the countless races that had been oppressed by the foreign world's creatures. What was Heaven's will? Heaven's will was the will of all living beings. When all living beings had pledged their allegiance to Fortune Heavenly Monarch, what could stop him from moving forward? From the first time they fought, he was able to suppress the Fortune Heavenly Lord. Later on, he tied with him and then surpassed him. It didn't take much time at all. Such a frightening speed had frightened them, but it was already too late by the time they reacted. The Fortune Creation Heavenly Monarch was already fated to be the Heavenly Monarch. After defeating him in battle, he broke through to the sovereign realm in one fell swoop and suppressed him with a flip of his hand. Although he didn't die, he knew that it wasn't because he couldn't kill him, but because there was no need to. The situation was different now. Compared to the Fortune Heavenly Lord who organized the Fortune God dynasty, the foreign domains were still in a state of disunity, each doing their own thing. It wasn't without reason that the foreign domains had been beaten by the Fortune God dynasty all these years. The Fortune God dynasty supreme could even mobilize the Fortune God dynasty's destiny to suppress and kill powerful enemies. And now, he wanted to change this situation. If the Fortune Heavenly Lord could do it, there was no reason he couldn't. It's you. The Chaos Overlord looked in Yi Shiwen's direction, but when he saw Yi Shiwen, his eyes suddenly burst with terrifying killing intent. Chapter 3754. Chaos Overlord recognized this person immediately. It was none other than Yi Shiwen. How could he not remember this person? In fact, in this world, other than the Fortune God dynasty, only Yi Shiwen had made him suffer. Even though Yi Shiwen was only a wisp of his soul incarnation, it was still a great humiliation to him. Others were worried about the identity of his real body. Most people did not have the strength to deal with his spirit incarnation. Even if they had the strength to deal with his spirit incarnation, they would not attack so unscrupulously. But Yi Shiwen attacked just like that. Not only did Shiwen destroy his spirit incarnation, but he also beheaded the only remaining disciple he had. Even with his cultivation, it was very difficult for him to groom a disciple at the heavenly venerable stage. This was unlike those below the extreme grade, which could be trained in batches. But when it came to the extreme grade, even if it was the Sovereign Emperor, it was impossible to train them in batches. It could only be said that with his guidance, this pattern could be greatly increased. Not to mention breaking the restrictions of the rules and breaking through to the Heavenly Master realm, which was even more difficult. Among his current disciples, there was only one Heavenly Master level disciple, and now he was beheaded by Yi Shiwen just like that. The heartache in his heart could be imagined. It was far more serious than Yi Shiwen killing his spirit incarnation. You still dare to show up? Chaos Overlord looked at Yi Shiwen coldly, wishing he could strangle him directly. However, the Chaos Overlord was not someone who only talked and did not practice. Almost as soon as his voice fell, Yi Shiwen instantly felt that all the surrounding laws were boiling. Those laws that could only be sensed and could not be seen emerged one after another, completely forming a terrifying torrent that blasted towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen suddenly felt that he had lost his control over all the principles of the world at this moment. He had been deprived of his control over all the principles of the world. This was the first time he had completely lost control of these laws since he had fought with someone. The strength of a heavenly master was not really that strong. To a large extent, it was also very important to borrow the power of the laws to attack. But now, the primal chaos overlord had stripped him of his control over the laws. Ordinary heavenly venerables were no longer able to contend against it. Although heavenly venerables were strong, they were too weak in front of a half-step sovereign realm expert who controlled all the laws. In the heavenly master realm, every realm was like a whole new world. Every step was like ascending to the heavens. Except for people like Yi Shiwen who had all kinds of fortuitous encounters, other people would be completely unable to cross these natural chasms. After being deprived of all control rights, the terrifying torrent of laws directly crushed towards Yi Shiwen. Boom! An incomparably deafening explosion was heard. That terrifying tide devoured and drowned everything in its path. Eastern Celestial Sovereign. Not good. Damn it. Many people couldn't help but exclaim when they saw this scene. However, there was nothing they could do. A battle of this level wasn't something they could participate in. They could only watch from afar and couldn't even lend a hand. Now, he could only watch helplessly as Yi Shiwen was engulfed by the law tide. Many people knew that a half-step sovereign realm expert was terrifying, but this level of terror was still beyond their expectations. It was much more terrifying than they had expected. Suddenly, they felt cold sweat dripping down their backs. The Eastern Celestial Sovereign was the leader of the entire Fortune Divine Dynasty. Now that even he was about to fall, was there any hope for the entire Fortune Divine Dynasty? Many people even felt despair for the first time. Facing a half-step sovereign realm expert, they didn't have the slightest chance of winning. This was just one of them. When the ancient era's half-step sovereigns also appeared, how would they resist? Was the fate of the martial epoch going to end here? From the ancient records, they knew that not all great eras could come to an end of old age. That terrifying scene of heaven collapsing and earth splitting, the mournful wails of all living beings, made their hair stand on end. It was because they too could die. However, just when they were all exclaiming in surprise, they saw Yi Shiwen's figure appearing in the midst of the frenzy. He was wearing a treasured robe that was engraved with an ancient symbol of asking for directions. It was protecting him. Good Fortune Treasured Robe. It's the Good Fortune Treasured Robe. Many people couldn't help but exclaim because they recognized that this was the magic tool that made the Fortune Divine Monarch famous. If the Fortune Divine Monarch hadn't refined the Fortune Creation Universe map later, this should have been the Fortune Divine Monarch's Life Dao tool. It was the Good Fortune Treasured Robe that protected Yi Shiwen. It protected him from being seriously injured by this torrential tide of the principles. Yi Shiwen didn't move at all, and he didn't seem to be affected at all. So it's the Good Fortune Treasured Robe. Is this why you dare to come out and fight me? The Chaos Overlord looked at Yi Shiwen coldly. His eyes were filled with endless killing intent. Just a pair of eyes alone could scare people to death. How would I dare to come up to Liangshan without a third? It's time for you to end your misdeeds. This is not a place where you should stay, or else I will let you know what is called the wrath of heaven and man. Yi Shiwen walked calmly in the sky, approaching the Chaos Overlord step by step without the slightest fear. Wrath of heaven and man? You want to fight me with just a Good Fortune Treasured Robe? I think you're too naive. Even if I'm not in my peak state, I'm not someone you can compete with now. The Chaos Overlord didn't care at all. Is that so? Yi Shiwen sneered. He raised his hand, and in an instant, the sky and earth changed color, and a boundless wave of air swept out. This wave of air was only one of them. Countless waves of air between heaven and earth condensed at this moment, and the aura of the mortal world was like a Milky Way manifesting above the entire divine capital of fortune. It vaguely turned into a giant dragon, baring its fangs and brandishing its claws, staring at the chaos overlord. The terrifying giant dragon manifested, and in an instant, all the creatures in the entire divine capital of fortune felt a faint pressure in their hearts, but there was no sense of oppression. The target of this giant dragon was only the Chaos Overlord. The Chaos Overlord suddenly felt a terrifying pressure. At this moment, he really felt the feeling that Yi Shiwen had felt before. Rejected by heaven and earth, and the world was hostile to you. What kind of feeling was that? It was as if you were in a strange environment, with no friends and family, and everyone was pointing a knife at you, ready to stab you to death at any time. This is the destiny of the Fortune God dynasty. You've only been the Eastern Heavenly Lord for a few years, but you can actually manifest the destiny of the Fortune God dynasty. Young man, you're really amazing. The Chaos Overlord was experienced and knowledgeable, and could be called an old monster. He immediately recognized that the energy dragon bearing its fangs and brandishing its claws was the destiny of the Fortune God dynasty. Destiny was something that could not be seen or touched, but it truly existed. Like heaven's will, it was a combination of the will of all the creatures in the Fortune God dynasty. The stronger the Fortune God dynasty, the stronger its destiny. The stronger the destiny, the stronger it could affect the strength of the Fortune God dynasty. Just like no one could resist heaven's will, no one could withstand the attack of the Fortune God dynasty's destiny. Even a half-step sovereign realm expert would be seriously injured or even die. This was the Fortune God dynasty's countless years of accumulation of people's will. No one could resist it. Although the current Fortune God dynasty could not be compared to its peak, its destiny was still terrifying. This was also one of the Fortune God dynasty's final trump cards. Let alone a half-step sovereign realm expert, even a sovereign realm expert would be seriously injured by this attack. This was the self-defense method of every era. Otherwise, how could those eras resist the vicious hands of those ancient eras that were like wolves and tigers? The Chaos Overlord certainly knew how terrifying the Fortune God dynasty's destiny was, but he couldn't figure out how Yi Shiwen could condense the Fortune God dynasty's destiny in one fell swoop after becoming the Eastern Heavenly Lord for such a short period of time. The reason why ordinary Heavenly Venerables couldn't compete with the Great Supremes was because the Great Supremes were chosen by Heaven's will. They had the Fortune God dynasty's destiny in their bodies. The longer they served as the Great Supremes, the richer their destiny would become, and they would receive various bonuses. Their rapid cultivation was just a side effect. Most importantly, they could summon the Fortune God dynasty's destiny at the critical moment to defeat any strong enemy. But to achieve this, one had to be the Great Supremes of the Fortune God dynasty for more than 1 billion years. As far as he knew, Yi Shiwen shouldn't have such a long time. Even Yi Shiwen's lifespan wasn't that long. No one in the entire Fortune God dynasty could achieve this. The last person he saw was a former Middle Heavenly Venerable. Fortune Heavenly Monarch naturally didn't count. At his level, he didn't need to rely on the Fortune God dynasty's destiny. Yi Shiwen smiled slightly. Under the contrast of the Fortune God dynasty's destiny, he was like the God of creation, the sole ruler of heaven and earth. With the degree of integration between him and the Fortune God dynasty, it was impossible to manifest the Fortune God dynasty's destiny and use it to attack the enemy. But it didn't mean that no one could do it. He did it by borrowing the Sword of Fate and the Fortune Treasure Robe. The former owners of these two supreme treasures could do this. He mobilized the Fortune God dynasty's destiny through the Sword of Fate and the Fortune Treasure Robe. Otherwise, it would be impossible. It should be the Fortune Treasure Robe. Young man, you do have wonderful ideas and some luck, But do you think you are invincible with the fortune treasure robe? What kind of person was Chaos Overlord? He quickly figured out the crux of the matter. You summoned the fortune god dynasty's destiny, but do you dare? Do you dare? Chapter 3755. Do you dare? The Chaos Overlord stood with his hands behind his back, looking at Yi Shiwen confidently, as if he didn't believe that Yi Shiwen would dare to attack the fortune god dynasty's destiny. The Chaos Overlord was naturally confident. The fortune god dynasty's destiny was indeed terrifying. Even half-step sovereign realm experts were severely injured or even killed by it. But every time it was used, it was very dangerous. The fortune god dynasty's destiny couldn't manifest, so it was difficult to damage it. It was the same as Heaven's will. Since Heaven's will couldn't manifest, there was no way to kill it. But since it had manifested, there was a possibility of being severely injured. It was possible to injure half-step sovereigns, but half-step sovereigns were powerful existences. How could they not react? At that time, both sides would most likely suffer heavy injuries. Therefore, this might be used as a last resort as a deterrent, but it couldn't be used. He was certain of this point. If the Fortune Divine Dynasty's dragon vein was damaged, the consequences would be unimaginable. With the protection of the Fortune Divine Dynasty's dragon vein, the Fortune Divine Dynasty could enjoy a smooth sailing. But if the Fortune Divine Dynasty's luck was damaged, it would immediately affect the Fortune Divine Dynasty, causing all kinds of disasters to erupt. Countless lives would be lost in an instant. In the distant past, this was very normal. It was an era where foreign life forms ran amok. However, after Fortune Heavenly Monarch established the Fortune Divine Dynasty, he used the entire Fortune Divine Dynasty's destiny to suppress the Fortune world, causing the probability of such disasters to decrease and become more and more peaceful. But it didn't mean that those disasters didn't exist anymore. They were just suppressed by the Fortune God Dynasty's destiny. Once an accident happened, the Fortune God Dynasty would be the first to suffer. And if the Fortune God Dynasty suffered a heavy blow, the Supremes would also be weakened. This was the price of being tied to the Fortune God Dynasty. Do you think I don't dare? Yi Shiwen asked indifferently, approaching the Chaos Overlord step by step. Behind him, the Fortune God Dynasty's dragon vein became more and more solid. In the beginning, it was only an illusory shadow, but in the end, one could see its scales and claws clearly. This was the public opinion of the Fortune God Dynasty moving towards Yi Shiwen. The reappearance of the Chaos Overlord had already caused panic in the Fortune God Dynasty. Now that Yi Shiwen had stepped forward, he naturally became the core of the entire Fortune God Dynasty. Naturally, the destiny of the Fortune God Dynasty would gather towards him. This process was very fast, and the effect was very obvious. One strike, and I can kill you. Yi Shiwen grinned, revealing his snow-white teeth. There was a mischievous look on his face. You wouldn't dare. Primal Chaos Overlord glared at him. Under normal circumstances, I wouldn't dare, but since you've forced me to this point, do I have a choice? Anyway, I'm gonna die either way, so what's the big deal if I drag one of them down with me? Yi Shiwen had an indifferent look on his face. This also made the Chaos Overlord a little silent. Under normal circumstances, Yi Shiwen really wouldn't dare. However, as he said, he had been forced to this point. It was nothing more than a matter of how he died. What was the difference? Putting himself in their shoes, if it were him, he wouldn't let himself have an easy time either. Moreover, even if the Fortune Divine Dynasty's dragon vein heavily injured and killed him, the Fortune Divine Dynasty might not necessarily perish. It would only suffer heavy injuries, and all kinds of troubles would be unavoidable. However, the Fortune Divine Dynasty wouldn't fall, and it would only decline further. Such a price was undoubtedly too small compared to death. It was even more so for a person like Yi Shiwen. You wouldn't dare, Primal Chaos Overlord said. He was still confident and domineering. Even if you make a move, you can't kill me. He knew what Yi Shiwen said just now. Using the Fortune Divine Dynasty's dragon vein to attack him was just a threat. However, such a threat would only become a reality in the end if he was really forced into a corner. Unfortunately, he had no way to deal with it. He didn't have the corresponding means because the outer domain was in a state of disunity. It was impossible to condense a terrifying existence like the Fortune Divine Dynasty's dragon vein. I can't kill you. Actually, you can try. Yi Shiwen was still smiling, but then his body slightly swayed, and the Fortune Divine Dynasty's dragon vein condensed behind him disappeared without a trace in an instant. But you're right about one thing. I wouldn't dare. For you alone, I'm putting people in an abyss of misery and suffering. However, it doesn't mean that I can't deal with you. Primal Chaos Overlord, do you dare to fight in the chaos? Let me see how many people were able to contend with the Fortune Creation Heavenly Monarch back then. Yi Shiwen said, and there was a hint of excitement in his expression. His goal had never been as simple as becoming a middle heavenly master of the Fortune Divine Dynasty. His goal had always been to become a powerful ruler-level figure like the Fortune Divine Monarch. Therefore, he was also very interested in the Primal Chaos Overlord. Not long ago, he was a figure that he couldn't even look up to, but now he was a measuring stick to test the results of his cultivation. And the Primal Chaos Overlord naturally saw through Yi Shiwen's undisguised purpose, and his heart was filled with anger. What kind of figure was he? Now, he had become a measuring stick for Yi Shiwen to measure himself against. Arrogant boy, you will pay the price. The Primal Chaos Overlord's voice became calmer, but everyone knew that his killing intent would only become stronger and stronger. He couldn't wait to tear Yi Shiwen into pieces. Let's go, Yi Shiwen said. Yi Shiwen took a step and directly stepped into the chaos. And after him, the Primal Chaos Overlord also followed him into the chaos, not intending to fight in the Fortune Divine Dynasty. Otherwise, even if Yi Shiwen didn't take the initiative to draw out the Fortune Divine Dynasty's dragon vein of destiny, he might automatically appear. That would be the most troublesome. You're really arrogant. I will make you understand that compared to a true half-step ruler, your meager strength is nothing. The Primal Chaos Overlord said coldly. Whether I'm a match or not, you'll know once you try. Yi Shiwen sneered. Boom! There was a terrifying explosion, and the overwhelming power of the Primal Chaos Overlord boiled. The monstrous and terrifying aura not only far exceeded the level of a peak heavenly master, but it even shook the entire Fortune realm. The entire Fortune realm could sense the existence of this terrifying aura. All of a sudden, the heavenly masters in the Fortune realm were alarmed, and they all rushed out of the Fortune realm and into the chaos. It wasn't just the heavenly masters of the Fortune Divine Dynasty, but even the heavenly masters of the other domains. All of them were alarmed by this terrifying aura. Only a half-step sovereign realm expert would be able to envelop the entire Fortune world with his aura. Yi Shiwen's previous battle with a peak heavenly master had only alarmed the heavenly masters of one domain, and it wouldn't affect those further away. The gap between the two sides was obvious. That's the Primal Chaos Overlord. A heavenly master of the Fortune Divine Dynasty saw the Primal Chaos Overlord, and he immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. In the center of that raging wave, a person with seemingly world-destroying power stood between heaven and earth. In the face of this power, even a peak heavenly master was too insignificant. Although Yi Shiwen was also very strong, and even far surpassed a peak heavenly master, he was still a little bit inferior. Therefore, it gave people a feeling of subconsciously ignoring it. And the heavenly masters of the Fortune Divine Dynasty cursed inwardly. The Primal Chaos Overlord's terrifying strength was definitely not a good thing for the entire Fortune Divine Dynasty. All these years, the Fortune Divine Dynasty had been able to hang around and beat the foreign domains to a large extent because the foreign domains didn't have a backbone, but with the reappearance of the Primal Chaos Overlord, everything would be different. What was more frightening was that this was happening at a time when the Fortune Divine Dynasty was in a precarious situation, adding snow to snow. Its Lord Primal Chaos Overlord. Unlike the people of the Fortune Divine Dynasty, When the foreign domain's heavenly masters saw the primal chaos overlord, a small portion of them revealed a surprised expression, but most of them were frowning. Different from the Fortune Divine Dynasty, the foreign domains had more than one half-step sovereign expert. Even the primal chaos overlord couldn't dominate the world in the past, and could only be said to be on equal footing with those few experts. And these people also belonged to those few experts' forces, but those experts were later defeated and killed by the Fortune Heavenly Monarch, leaving only the primal chaos overlord. In the hearts of these people, they probably didn't welcome the return of the primal chaos overlord. It had been too long since they had submitted to others, and they had almost forgotten this feeling. Moreover, although they all belonged to the foreign domains were just a geographical term. In fact, they had never belonged to the same force. It was just that under the pressure of the Fortune Divine Dynasty, they had reluctantly joined forces to resist the Fortune Divine Dynasty. In the past, when they belonged to different half-step sovereign experts, they had also fought against each other, resulting in countless deaths and injuries. The hatred between them was no less than the hatred between them and the Fortune Divine Dynasty. It was just that the Fortune Heavenly Monarch's performance was too strong. Thus, they had no choice but to join forces. Now that the primal chaos overlord had returned, it was probably not a good thing. The foreign domain's rules were completely different from the Fortune Divine Dynasties. The Fortune Divine Dynasty still had basic rules that restrained each other, and even a middle heavenly venerable couldn't really do as they pleased. But if the primal chaos overlord returned, they had no other choice but to submit. Either submit or die. For a time, many heavenly venerables who rushed to the chaos space had mixed feelings, and all kinds of feelings rose in their hearts. But most of them probably didn't have any good thoughts about the primal chaos overlord's return. The terrifying aura was like a raging tide, directly shrouding Yishiwen. The chaos space exploded, and Yishiwen was like a small boat in a raging tide, on the verge of capsizing at any time. Previously, the primal chaos overlord had used to deprive Yishiwen of all his laws, but after discovering that Yishiwen had the good fortune treasure robe to protect him, he discovered that this method of bullying ordinary peak heavenly venerables was no longer effective. The only way was to suppress Yishiwen with absolute strength. The chaos space trembled violently, torn apart by a terrifying force. Chapter 3756. A terrifyingly powerful force erupted in an instant. At this moment, Yishiwen took the initiative to move. He let out a long roar that shook the entire chaos. His entire body was emitting the radiance of the 3,000 martial arts laws. All kinds of immortal lights scattered in the chaos like rain, showing off his strength. Many heavenly masters who were watching the battle at the edge of the chaos couldn't help but gasp when they saw this scene. This was also a tough guy. Obviously, his strength was far beyond ordinary peak heavenly masters. He wasn't someone that ordinary people could compare with. Swish! Yishiwen's figure disappeared, and a dragon rose and a phoenix fell. In an instant, he had already rushed to the front of the Chaos Overlord. A huge crack appeared in the aura of the Chaos Overlord, and the chaos was smashed by Yishiwen's rampage. Heaven and earth were torn apart, and the galaxy turned into powder. The horror here was unimaginable. 6 paths of reincarnation fist. Yishiwen blasted out a punch. In an instant, a huge 6 paths of reincarnation wheel appeared behind him. This huge 6 paths of reincarnation wheel rotated continuously. Every time it rotated, a terrifying force would enter Yishiwen's arms. This punch penetrated everything and directly blasted in front of the Chaos Overlord. Not bad. This punch still has room for development. The true meaning of the 6 paths of reincarnation fist is in line with the cycle of heaven and earth. It's indeed amazing, but you're too weak. The Chaos Overlord opened his eyes. In an instant, countless rays of light emerged from the chaos. The laws were forced into rays of light by the Chaos Overlord, and they turned into a huge cage that instantly locked Yishiwen and imprisoned him. At this moment, the Chaos Overlord finally made his move. A spear had appeared in his hand. This spear traversed the entire universe, and it was full of traces of weathering time. There were even many cracks and potholes on it. Each crack and pothole represented an earth-shattering battle. However, this spear didn't weaken. On the contrary, it only made it stronger. Blood dripped down drop by drop. Each drop of blood contained a world-shaking aura, like a vast ocean. It was unknown just how many peerless experts' blood this spear had drunk. This spear slowly cut through the chaos. It seemed slow, and everyone could see it. However, it seemed slow, but it was actually fast. In an instant, it had already approached Yi Shiwen's forehead and was about to blast Yi Shiwen's head into pieces. Yi Shiwen was imprisoned in this cage of principles. He wanted to retreat, but there was no way at all. All the principles were ineffective. Within this range, the Chaos Overlord was the true ruler of the world. Boom! This spear eventually bombarded Yi Shiwen's head, but it was only 3 inches in front of him and couldn't advance any further. Around Yi Shiwen's body, the good fortune treasured robe appeared again, emitting good fortune immortal light that illuminated the entire chaos. At this moment, Yi Shiwen was like the good fortune heaven lord in the past. Yi Shiwen's eyes flickered with a terrifying light. The good fortune treasured robe was indeed powerful, and it could block the Chaos Overlord's attack. However, at the same time, its consumption was terrifying. Just to block this attack, 1/10 of the king-level dragon vein disappeared without a trace. It was directly consumed in an instant. Apart from a behemoth like the Fortune God Dynasty, who could use the good fortune treasured robe, it didn't seem like the consumption was exaggerated, but the Chaos Overlord could launch such an attack thousands of times in an instant. This was the most terrifying aspect. With the good fortune treasured robe, Yi Shiwen had the strength to fight against a half-step ruler, but that was all. However, just when the good fortune treasured robe appeared to block the Chaos Overlord's attack, Yi Shiwen's body just swayed slightly, and he stabilized his figure, and then instantly attacked again. A blazing light shone between heaven and earth. Yi Shiwen spread his hands like 2 giant dragons, and in an instant he had already torn the law cage in front of him into pieces. Even if you deprive me of my control over the law, I can still kill you. Yi Shiwen roared, and already appeared in front of the Chaos Overlord. You overestimate yourself. You're courting death. The corner of the Chaos Overlord's mouth twitched slightly, and he didn't take Yi Shiwen seriously at all. Yi Shiwen had the protection of the good fortune treasured robe, which was like a tortoiseshell that was difficult to penetrate. However, in his eyes, Yi Shiwen's attack was nothing. Yi Shiwen's attack couldn't harm his main body. Unless Yi Shiwen used the Fortune God Dynasty's dragon vein, he had nothing to fear. But now, it seemed like Yi Shiwen wasn't ready to perish together with him. Entering the chaos was also one of his plans. In the Fortune God Dynasty, Yi Shiwen could use the Fortune God Dynasty's dragon vein, but in the chaos, it was another matter. Yi Shiwen's attack arrived in front of the Chaos Overlord. The fist energy of the 6 paths of reincarnation fist was peeled off layer by layer. It was like the outer shell was peeled off layer by layer. All that was left was Yi Shiwen's simple fist. Boom! This punch directly blasted 3 inches in front of the Chaos Overlord, and it stopped, unable to go any further. You overestimate yourself. Do you think your attack can hurt me? With just the good fortune treasured robe? The Chaos Overlord sneered and was about to attack. Suddenly, a strange phenomenon appeared behind Yi Shiwen. An incomparably huge and long river appeared in front of everyone. This long river was not flowing with water, but the fate of everyone. The fate of countless creatures in the world all flowed in it. Only by cutting off the existence of a long river of fate could one get rid of the shackles of the long river of fate. What is this? The Chaos Overlord realized something was wrong almost instantly, but it was too late. He was too confident, so he let Yi Shiwen get too close. Originally, this distance was also absolutely safe for him. Even if Yi Shiwen attacked in front of him, what could he do? It was impossible for Yi Shiwen to hurt him. However, now he realized something was wrong. Unknowingly, a sword appeared in Yi Shiwen's hand. This sword directly turned into the long river of fate, and it slashed down fiercely. Slashed the heavens and earth. Yi Shiwen shouted, and a terrifying power erupted in an instant. The blazing light drowned everything, and the chaos was shocked. Many celestial venerables saw this scene, and not one of them didn't suck in a breath of cold air. Even the creatures in the fortune realm were affected, and none of them didn't tremble. This kind of attack was too terrifying. This was the three swords of fate. The tool spirit of the sword of fate had forced Yi Shiwen into a difficult situation by relying on the strike, the heaven and earth. So, Yi Shiwen had used it now. Its might was even more horrifying. Boom! The sword landed heavily on the Chaos Overlord's body. In an instant, a flower of blood bloomed, and a huge bloody gash appeared on the Chaos Overlord's chest. Endless golden blood followed closely behind, directly splashing out and falling into the chaos, directly blasting many holes in the chaos. The blood of a half-step sovereign-level expert was too heavy and too terrifying. Puff! The Chaos Overlord spat out a mouthful of blood, and then he was sent flying. His whole body was like a meteor, directly tearing a huge crack in the universe. How is this possible? This is the sword of fate. The Chaos Overlord immediately recognized the sword in Yi Shiwen's hand. He was all too familiar with it. Although the person who sealed him was Fortune Creation Heaven Lord, he had tried to escape in those long years, and at that time, he was suppressed by the Middle Heavenly Master several times. Naturally, he had a deep impression of the former Middle Heavenly Master's sword of fate. Compared to the older generation, the former Middle Heavenly Master could only be considered a rising star. After the Fortune God Dynasty was established, and after Fortune Creation Heaven Lord broke through to the Supreme Realm, he broke through to the half-step Sovereign Realm. Even so, he did not dare to underestimate the former Middle Heavenly Master. No one dared to underestimate an expert who could step into the half-step Sovereign Realm. No matter how he stepped into this realm, it was extraordinary, powerful, and terrifying. At this time, he finally understood where Yi Shiwen's confidence came from. He actually dared to fight with him in the universe's chaos. The Sword of Fate was used for attack, and the Fortune Creation Treasure Robe was used for defense. This lineup was simply shocking. It was as if two great heavenly masters were attacking him at the same time. If he was prepared and at his peak, even with the Sword of Fate, it would be impossible to seriously injure him. However, after all, he was not at his peak, and he was unprepared. He did not expect that Yi Shiwen had already subdued the Sword of Fate. This was why he was caught off guard and suffered a big loss. He tried to stabilize his body in the process of flying backward, and even directly stopped himself. All of this seemed to take a long time, but in fact, it only took a moment. How could Yi Shiwen let go of this opportunity? It could be said that he was taking advantage of the Chaos Overlord. In an instant, Yi Shiwen appeared in front of the Chaos Overlord again, and the Sword of Fate in his hand was waved again. In an instant, countless strange phenomena appeared again, and the River of Fate appeared again. In an instant, it turned into a terrifying attack, and in an instant, it drowned the Chaos Overlord. The Chaos Overlord was caught off guard, or rather, he had no time to defend at all. At this time, the consequences of Yi Shiwen taking the initiative completely erupted, and he had no chance to resist at all. Boom! The Chaos Overlord flew backward at an even more astonishing speed and spat out another mouthful of blood. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere, and bone fragments flew everywhere. Under this blow, he completely suffered a big loss. Chapter 37:57. The Sword of Destiny swept out twice, and both swords directly hit the Chaos Overlord's body. It wasn't that the Chaos Overlord didn't have the ability to resist, but when Yi Shiwen took the initiative to seize the initiative, the strength advantage that he originally had was completely reversed. He couldn't exert the power at all. Boom! 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 After this move succeeded again, Yi Shiwen crazily performed a series of Sword of Destinies cleaving heaven and earth. The terrifying sword Chi Frenzy directly surrounded the Chaos Overlord, drowning everything, including the entire chaos. Even the entire scope of the sword light expanded all the way to the edge of the entire chaos. The celestial masters at the edge of the chaos also retreated. The terrifying sword light only swept a little bit, but it made them want to vomit blood. Boom! There was another huge roar, and the Chaos Overlord that was shrouded in the sword light finally let out a huge roar. A figure penetrated through everything and flew out. He was covered in blood. Golden blood was sprinkled in the chaos, and bone fragments were flying everywhere. It was extremely tragic. Everyone took a closer look. Who else could it be but the Chaos Overlord? Hiss! Many celestial masters took a deep breath. They couldn't believe it. Although they could roughly guess what kind of scene it would be when Yi Shiwen's series of cleaving heaven and earth slashed down, they still couldn't help but take a deep breath when they saw this scene. However, Chaos Overlord was no longer as carefree as before. His body was already covered with dense scales, and he withstood Yi Shiwen's sword of fate that was slashing down. For him, it was also a great injury, and he even faintly revealed his original form. Of course, everyone knew that the Chaos Overlord was not a human. It was impossible for him to have a human form. He just maintained a human form. His original body was said to be a chaos beast. From the moment he was born, he stirred up the world. He could be regarded as the best among the innate gods. But no one had ever seen his original form, and now he was actually forced to this point by Yi Shiwen. It was conceivable how urgent the situation he encountered was. Huff, huff, huff. The Chaos Overlord was constantly panting. Every time he panted, his aura recovered a little. It didn't take long for him to recover. The scales on his body also receded. On the other side, Yi Shiwen finally revealed himself. He held the Sword of Fate in his hand, and his aura was a bit thicker. The continuous use of the Sword of Fate had consumed a lot of his strength. Although activating the Sword of Destiny mainly consumed the energy sphere in his body, this series of consumption was also huge for him. Yi Shiwen couldn't help but be slightly surprised. A half-step sovereign lord like the Chaotic Overlord could recover so quickly. His vitality was so tenacious that it far surpassed any peak heavenly venerable he knew. If this series of attacks had landed on a middle heavenly venerate, it would have been enough to kill him. However, when it landed on the Chaos Overlord, it only seriously injured him. Moreover, he had already recovered in a short time. It was far more terrifying than a peak heavenly venerable's recovery ability. One had to know that this series of attacks had consumed an energy ball and the energy of dozens of king-class dragon veins. The Sword of Fate was indeed powerful, but the consumption was too great. Unless he could replenish it at any time and place near the Fortune Divine capital, he wouldn't be able to sustain such consumption. Apart from the Fate creation Heavenly Lord, you're the only one who's managed to force me to this extent. The Chaos Overlord stared at Yi Shiwen as a cruel smile flashed across his lips. Even he couldn't withstand the series of attacks just now. Every attack of cutting the heavens and earth was equivalent to a full force attack from a half-step sovereign expert. He couldn't underestimate it. It's a pity. If it was his original master, this series of attacks might really have seriously injured me. I wouldn't have been able to recover or even killed, but you're still a little lacking, the Chaos Overlord said. This time, I came out thinking that I was invincible in the world. I didn't expect someone like you to exist. It's just the right time to kill you. And how many times can you withstand such attacks? The Chaos Overlord grinned. His smile was full of killing intent. It was extremely terrifying. It's enough to kill you. You don't need to pretend that nothing has happened. You recover quickly, but you're not in your peak state. How much did you pay to recover so quickly? Yi Shiwen looked at him and said without the slightest bit of fear. Yi Shiwen didn't believe that the Chaos Overlord was as relaxed as he appeared. Everything in the world had to abide by the rules. It was impossible to do anything without paying a price. He had used cutting the heavens and earth many times thanks to the energy ball in his body. Otherwise, he would have exhausted all his spiritual power after using it twice. 3 Swords of Fate. This is just cutting the heavens and earth. What about cutting the chaos and cutting the fate? Why don't you use it? The Chaos Overlord looked at Yi Shiwen and said, "It's enough to deal with you, but I won't kill you today. I have more important things to do than killing you." Yi Shiwen said lightly. He didn't want to kill the Chaos Overlord completely. Normally, he wouldn't let go of such a great threat. Even if he had to pay a huge price, he wouldn't be lenient. He would kill the Chaos Overlord while he wasn't at his peak. What fair fight? That depended on the situation. However, it was different now. The experts of the ancient epoch could appear at any time. Every half-step ruler expert that appeared in the martial epoch was crucial to the martial epoch. Yi Shiwen wasn't confident of dealing with the sneak attacks of so many antiques from the ancient epoch. Furthermore, he felt that things were not that simple this time. This was especially so after the appearance of the half-step ruler half-moon immortal lord of this epoch. It made him feel that things were not as simple as he had imagined. Was this really just those antiques trying to save themselves? Perhaps, but that was definitely not the whole truth. Furthermore, if he raised his cultivation to the peak for the sake of killing the Chaos Overlord, he might not succeed even if he paid a huge price. The earlier series of attacks already showed how difficult it was to kill a half-step ruler. He was only confident of success if he reached the 9th realm. "You won't kill me? Ha 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 ha." The Chaos Overlord laughed maniacally, as if he had heard the funniest joke in the world. "You won't kill me, but I will kill you." The Chaos Overlord's entire body was filled with murderous intent, becoming extremely dangerous. The earlier series of battles had thoroughly enraged him. Yi Shiwen even said that he wouldn't kill him. To the Chaos Overlord, this was a great humiliation. Boom! The Chaos Overlord didn't intend to stop the battle at all. On the contrary, it directly pounced on Yi Shiwen like a prehistoric giant beast, crashing and crashing. The Chaos Overlord's physical body was far stronger than Yi Shiwen's. Hence, he had no fear. Even the weakest half-step ruler was several times stronger than a peak heavenly venerate. Boundless brilliant light splashed out, and the laws blasted out like waves. The entire primal chaos was annihilated. Destruction was the main theme of all this. Stubborn fool. Yi Shiwen snorted coldly, and a terrifying light burst out of his eyes. He also sublimated his own aura, completely integrating himself with the Good Fortune treasure robe. Soon, the power of the Good Fortune treasure robe erupted, and he integrated it into one. Yi Shiwen held the Sword of Destiny in his hand and directly charged at the Chaos Overlord. "Since you don't want to retreat, then I will kill my way to the place where you retreat." The two were like 2 terrifying, chaotic storms, colliding fiercely in the entire primal chaos. However, this was just the beginning. 2 terrifying and violent figures constantly collided in the primal chaos. Every time they collided, it set off a terrifying frenzy in the primal chaos, causing the primal chaos to collapse with a monstrous force. Such an attack seemed to be even more terrifying than before, especially for many heavenly venerates. Previously, Yi Shiwen's slash the heavens and earth was like a storm. Although it was terrifying, he was the only one attacking. But now, the two of them erupted together. Yi Shiwen could no longer find such a good opportunity to ruthlessly release a wave of slash the heavens and earth. After suffering a loss once, it was obvious that the Chaos Overlord would not give Yi Shiwen such an opportunity again. Hence, towards the end of the battle, it was almost the simplest and most direct collision, using their tyrannical strength to fight. The Chaos Overlord was incomparably violent, as if he could suppress the entire primal chaos by himself. The primal chaos creatures within countless miles did not dare to approach him at all, as if they were frightened. Yi Shiwen was wearing the Good Fortune treasure robe, and the Sword of Destiny in his hand was not inferior in any way. Vaguely, it seemed as if 2 great supremes were possessing him, and his divine bravery was unstoppable. Neither of them could be considered a true battle between half-step sovereigns. The Chaos Overlord was no longer at its peak, and Yi Shiwen's combat power had increased temporarily with the help of two supreme treasures. However, many heavenly venerates were already dumbfounded. If they were in such a battle, they would almost be sending themselves to their deaths directly. No one knew how long this battle would last. It might be 1,000 years, or even 10,000 years. But everyone also knew that it would not last long. Both of them were not in normal conditions, so it was destined that it would not be a protracted battle. As if responding to everyone's thoughts, the two figures crisscrossed and exploded the primal chaos. Both of them were a little embarrassed, and they were constantly panting. In comparison, Yi Shiwen was obviously in a much better state. The good fortune treasure robe was firmly protecting him. Unless the energy balls on his body were exhausted, he would be fine. On the other hand, the Chaos Overlord was in a much more embarrassing state. There were many injuries on his body. Although they were not serious, it was already shocking to him. How about it? Do you want to continue fighting? Chapter 3758. How about it? Do you want to continue? Yi Shiwen looked at the Chaos Overlord opposite him. The Chaos Overlord stared at Yi Shiwen. In the series of battles just now, he did not gain any upper hand. In the beginning, he underestimated Yi Shiwen. As a result, he suffered a huge loss. If that could be explained as an accident, he did not gain much advantage in the subsequent battles. Yi Shiwen wore the good fortune treasure robe and held the sword of destiny in his hand. It was very difficult to injure him seriously. Unless the resources on his body were exhausted, it was difficult to hurt Yi Shiwen. In particular, the good fortune treasure robe was the Tao tool of the Fate Heaven Lord. How could he not know this? He had fought with the Fate Heaven Lord many times, so he naturally knew the power of the good fortune treasure robe. In particular, Yi Shiwen forced the good fortune treasure robe to the extreme at all costs. It made him feel like he was wearing a tortoise shell. If that was all, it would be fine. However, Yi Shiwen had the sword of destiny in his hand, which had the strength to hurt him. Most importantly, he was not at his peak state. He had been suppressed for too long, and his vitality was really injured. Although he knew that Yi Shiwen was only relying on external forces now, it was indeed not something that he could take down. Although he hated Yi Shiwen, he also knew that there would be no result if he continued to fight. He could not kill Yi Shiwen. On the other hand, although Yi Shiwen could cause some damage to him, he could not kill him. If he really fought to the death, the final result was likely to be a lose-lose situation. Oomph. The Chaos Overlord snorted coldly. He glanced at Yi Shiwen, took a step forward, and left the chaos. The direction he left was the direction of the outer domain, not the Fortune God dynasty. Because he knew that if he continued to cause trouble in the Fortune God capital, he was afraid that the Fortune God dynasty's dragon vein would really attack him. Yi Shiwen breathed a sigh of relief. He finally forced the Chaos Overlord to retreat. This was also part of his plan. He wanted to fight with the Chaos Overlord as soon as he arrived, so that the Chaos Overlord could face his strength. He would not underestimate him, so there would be room for cooperation against the ancient era's half-step sovereign-level masters. As the saying goes, dragons don't live with snakes. How could an eagle cooperate with an ant? Only by displaying sufficient strength would he have the possibility of cooperating with the primal Chaos Overlord. As far as Yi Shiwen was concerned, this battle was the realization of his own plan. Everything was under his control and rhythm from the beginning to the end. As for the surrounding heavenly venerables, they were a little dumbfounded. They were well aware of how deadly the primal Chaos Overlord was. He could be said to be the strongest person in the world, especially when the Fortune Creation Heavenly Lord and the former Middle Celestial Lord had already disappeared. Originally, they thought that no one could stop the current Chaos Overlord. Who knew that Yi Shiwen could actually stop the Chaos Overlord? Moreover, he wasn't just barely stopping the primal Chaos Overlord. Instead, he wasn't at a disadvantage at all. In fact, he was even able to catch the primal Chaos Overlord off guard and beat him up. Although the primal chaos overlord wasn't at his peak, and Yishuan also borrowed external forces, there was no doubt that Yishuan's combat strength had truly reached that realm. For the experts of the outer domain, the appearance of two half-step sovereign-level masters was undoubtedly not good news. Whether they appeared in the Fortune God dynasty or the outer domain, unless that person was themselves, it couldn't be considered good news. As for the heavenly venerables of the Fortune God dynasty, they were undoubtedly excited. Yishuan's combat strength had soared to that realm, which was good news for the entire Fortune God dynasty, especially in the situation where the Doomsday battle was imminent. It was just that the current Middle Celestial Lord should be the leader, and he was the Vice-Emperor of the Fortune God dynasty. However, Yishuan had clearly surpassed the Middle Celestial Lord. From all aspects, it was impossible for him to be inferior to others. At that time, both sides would inevitably have a fierce battle. But no matter what, that was a matter for the future. Now, the stronger Yishuan was, the more confident they were. The news that Yishuan had fought to a draw with the primal chaos overlord soon spread throughout the Fortune God dynasty, the outer domain, and even the epic battlefield with the return of the heavenly venerables. Everyone was incomparably shocked. Another peerless master was slowly rising. At the same time, everyone was also caught unprepared. Yishuan's speed of advancement was too fast. He had only been a heavenly venerable for tens of thousands of years, but now he had ascended all the way. Not only did he become an Eastern heavenly venerable, but now he could even fight to a draw with the primal chaos overlord. Even the fate creation heavenly monarch back then couldn't compare to this speed of ascension. Many people were watching. Perhaps after the fate creation heavenly monarch, there would be another sovereign-level master. Although there had never been a situation where two sovereign-level masters appeared in an era since ancient times, Yishuan might have the opportunity to break this rule. With the announcement of Yishuan's battle, the power of the human clan became stronger and stronger. Everyone knew that Yishuan was from the human clan, and he usually supported the human clan. Therefore, the human clan could be considered to have completely stabilized their newly acquired territory. Moreover, from time to time, experts from all over the world would come and join them. Everyone knew that Yishuan was like the sun in the sky, and his future achievements would be unimaginable. Perhaps he could become the next fate creation heavenly monarch. If such a day really came, they would become the future heroes of the fate creation heavenly monarch. Back then, there were so many experts who followed the fate creation heavenly monarch. Later on, which one of them didn't become famous and top experts in the world? If Yishuan was successful, they could also ascend to heaven with him. Moreover, with the passage of time, the matter of the possible world-ending battle began to gradually become known. In such a world-ending battle, it was almost impossible for them to have the strength to protect themselves. They could only rely on a matchless powerhouse. Currently, the two biggest thighs of the entire fate domain were the chaotic overlord. It was a foreign creature, and the hatred between them was as deep as the sea. Obviously, it was impossible to rely on the chaotic overlord. Therefore, there weren't many options left for them, and that was to rely on Yishuan. Therefore, after this battle, all kinds of experts suddenly joined the human clan. However, at this time, the human clan began to choose according to Yishuan's instructions. It was better to have nothing than to have someone of inferior quality. If the human clan wanted to develop and grow, it was indeed the best and fastest way to absorb these experts in a short period of time. However, they couldn't leave behind any hidden dangers. Although Yishuan was in charge, and no hidden dangers could turn the sky upside down, but it was impossible to recruit just anyone. In addition to the human clan, the Eastern Heavenly Venerate residence was also a boiling cauldron of voices. The number of people coming and going was simply uncountable. All of them wanted to become subordinates of the Eastern Heavenly Venerate residence and serve the Eastern Heavenly Venerate Yishuan. Not only were there sovereign emperors and quasi-emperors from small sects, but there were also many heavenly venerates. They also sent their disciples to the Eastern Heavenly Venerate residence to serve the Eastern Heavenly Venerate. Some even personally came to the Eastern Heavenly Venerate to recommend themselves. All of this changed after this battle. Previously, when Yishiwen succeeded as the Eastern Heavenly Venerate, not many people recognized him at all. He only held the title of the Eastern Heavenly Venerate of the Fortune God Dynasty. In fact, it couldn't be considered as a true title. There were also many people who didn't accept him on the surface. However, with the end of this battle, everything changed. Obviously, Yishiwen had become the strongest person in the entire Fortune God Dynasty. Not to mention the Eastern Heavenly Venerate. Even if he wanted to become a Middle Heavenly Venerate, it was more than enough. It could be said that in the current Fortune God Dynasty, no one could stop Yishiwen's footsteps. Under such circumstances, if they still didn't know what was good for them, then the consequences were obvious. If Yishiwen caught them were hurt, even if they were killed, no one would stand up for them. Moreover, it wasn't just the Eastern region. Even the Western region, Northern region, Southern region, and even the 10 great divine cities, which were not under Yishiwen's jurisdiction, had heavenly venerates express their goodwill to Yishiwen. They expressed that they would listen to Yishiwen's instructions and fully prepare for the battle against the ancient era. In this battle, not only had Yishiwen realized his plan, but he had also displayed his might. He had let everyone in the world see his strength, and who is the current ruler of the Fortune God Dynasty. Yishiwen didn't care about these mundane matters. He let Sword Master's avatar come out of seclusion to deal with them, while he himself focused on comprehending and waiting for the opportunity to break through. In fact, he could already break through to the 9th realm now, but he forcefully suppressed it because he knew that if he broke through to the 9th realm now, his combat strength would indeed increase tremendously, but it would still not be comparable to a half-step sovereign. It wouldn't be of much use to the overall situation of the war. He wanted to thoroughly comprehend the great Tao of the half-step sovereign realm. He wanted to extrapolate his 3,000 martial Taos to the half-step sovereign realm. At that time, he could directly consume the world tree fruit to break through, and his true battle prowess would naturally break through to the half-step sovereign realm. This step was very difficult, extremely difficult. It could even be said that it was a method that had never been done before or since. Once he succeeded, he would create history and dazzle the present. It wasn't that he didn't know how difficult it was, but he had no other choice. If he broke through to the 9th realm, he wouldn't have enough time and accumulation to break through to half-step sovereign. Time, to him, was the most pressing thing. In order to save time, he had to take the shortcut that was full of thorns. He might walk this path covered in blood, but he had no other choice. In his inner world, the world tree fruit had finally ripened, quietly waiting for Yishiwen to pick it, emitting a gentle light. His mysterious space was still continuously absorbing the spiritual energy from an energy ball, constantly deducing the great Tao of half-step sovereign of Yishiwen's 3,000 martial Tao. Everything was a race against time. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.